Chapter 101, Ignorance is Bliss Part 1. When William opened his eyes, he found himself staring at a sea of stars. He blinked once then twice as the gears inside his mind started to turn. I was in Master's room, William thought as he tried to remember the sequence of events that happened before he lost consciousness. Master made me lie on the bed, then she asked me to close my eyes. After that I felt something soft touch my lips, and then I found myself here. The young boy's thoughts didn't continue past that point because a familiar voice whispered in his ears. Glad to see you are finally awake, Celine whispered. Although, it doesn't bother me much, can you put on some clothes first? Huh. William turned his head to look at his beautiful master. Celine was wearing a skin-tight bodysuit that seemed to resemble Catwoman's costume. The corner of Celine's lips was curled up into a teasing smile as she looked at William's lower half. How cute, Celine teased. William lowered his head to look at what Celine was staring at. His body immediately curled up like a shrimp as he used his hands to cover the proud and mighty little William who was standing up in its full glory. Calm down, Celine chuckled as she looked at the embarrassed boy in front of her. We are inside your sea of consciousness. Just imagine yourself wearing clothes and the problem will be solved. The boy immediately did as he was told and clothes did appear on his body. William sighed in relief as he felt the familiar shepherd's clothes that he had been wearing for a long time. Master, you said we are inside my sea of consciousness. How come you are here? William inquired. This was not the first time he entered his own sea of consciousness because this place was where the divinities hid themselves inside his body. He was just surprised that Celine was here as well. Good question. Celine nodded her head. The answer to your question, my dear disciple, is that I snuck inside your sea of consciousness. The reason? The reason is because this will be the special venue for the next phase of your training. System, can you hear me? William whispered in his mind. Yes. Will there be a problem if we train inside my sea of consciousness? If the host's soul receives sufficient damage, then this place might collapse, and you will not be able to wake up ever again. In the outside world, you will be in a coma for the rest of your life. William sucked in cold breath as he realized the grave danger he was in. Celine said that this would be the venue of their training. This meant that one mistake and he would become a vegetable for life. The young boy lightly coughed as he looked at his master with pleading eyes. Master, can we switch locations? This place is not a suitable training area. No, Celine shook his head. This is the perfect place for our training. We will be killing two birds with one stone if we do our training here. Master, do you know that I might die if we train here? Yes. That's precisely why we're training here, my cute disciple. William's face darkened when he realized that Celine was fully aware of the dangers that accompanied training inside his sea of consciousness. What William didn't know was that even though the system said that he would go into a coma if his soul received sufficient damage inside this place, it was not as bad as he thought it would be. Only when his soul disintegrated into 1,000,000 pieces will the sufficient damage clause apply. Meaning, even if he was sliced into 100, even thousands of pieces, the injury to his soul would be very minimal. Even Truck-Khan, the #1 perpetrator in sending people to the iSky worlds, could only temporarily damage William's soul after he crashed on him. Simply put, it would take an extremely powerful attack to damage a soul beyond repair. Don't worry. At most you will be unable to move your body for a few days, Celine assured him. However, this training will be very beneficial to you. How can this training be beneficial to me, Master? William inquired. Can't we just do regular training? Celine sighed as she tucked her long, silky, purple hair behind her elven ears. Your grandfather told me that the reason behind why you want to get stronger is because you wanted to go to the Silver Moon continent. You wanted to meet your mother, and find a way to save your father, correct? Yes, William answered. Do you have a plan in mind on how to accomplish your goal? Train until I become as strong as my father before I go and meet my mother. And how many years will that take? Celine placed her hands behind her back as she waited for William's answer. 20 years. You're quite an optimist, aren't you? What makes you think that the Elven Council will give you 20 years to grow? Check out LTSTVL on novel/bin.cm. William noticed that Celine's words were laced with malice when she mentioned the Elven Council. He didn't understand why Celine was telling him that the Elven Council would not give him time to grow. Master, what do you mean? William inquired. Why would the Elven Council target me? Do you really not know the answer, or are you just playing dumb? Celine looked at William with contempt. Master, I don't really understand what you're talking about. Ignorance is really bliss. Celine shook her head as if she was disappointed with William's answer. Enough. Celine raised her hand and a black spear that glinted with the power of darkness appeared in the air above her. We came here to train and not to talk about these things. Now, draw your weapon. Let me see the extent of what you've learned in your training. William looked at his master with a serious expression as he raised his hand. Come forth, Stormacaller. A spear materialized above William. It was the family heirloom of the Ainsworth family and the young boy grabbed it firmly in his hands. Tendrils of lightning snaked around the spear's body as its blade glowed with a purple light. Good stance, Celine praised. Let's see if it has substance. She took a step forward and disappeared from where she stood. A second later, she reappeared in front of William with her spear poised to strike. Although William wasn't able to follow her movements, his perception had alerted him of the danger in front of him. The two spears collided, but the one that was blown away was William's. Celine took another step forward and turned into a dark mist. William felt danger from behind, so he immediately turned his body to parry Celine's attack from his rear. Where are you looking? A teasing voice whispered in his ears. Before the young boy could do anything, his head was grabbed and slammed into the ground. Celine didn't stop her attack and kept on slamming William's face to the ground until the boy's face was smashed to a pulp. Chapter 102, Ignorance is Bliss Part 2. Master, you're so brutal, William said as his face automatically healed itself, once Celine had stopped her attacks and given him a moment to recover. Isn't it fine? Celine grinned as she twirled the spear in her hand. Inside this place, even if you die 1,000 times, you'll still be alive and kicking in the real world. William narrowed his gaze as he took a fighting stance to resume their battle. He knew that talking with Celine was pointless because the other was hell-bent to make him suffer. Since that was the case, he would do everything in his power to teach her a lesson as well. Master, I was holding back earlier, William stated in an arrogant manner. This time, I won't hold back. I apologize in advance if I hurt you. The young boy channeled all of his strength inside his body and prepared to give Celine a good beating. 5 minutes later. Master, it hurts? Please stop. Forgive me. William cried out like a pig being slaughtered as Celine continuously spanked his butt using the flat edge of the blade on her spear. You were acting so sure of yourself earlier, and now you're begging for forgiveness. Celine sneered. I wonder where that confidence of yours is coming from. Earlier, William had unleashed his full power and fought with everything he had. Things were going well in the first few minutes, but the balance was broken when Celine executed an aggressive battle style that cut off William's limbs one after the other. As the limbless boy fell on the ground, Celine kicked his body until his face was facing the floor. Seeing his defenseless state, Celine felt mischievous and began spanking William's bum with the spearhead's flat edge. After having her fill, Celine stopped spanking the boy and allowed William to regrow his arms and legs. I have to admit that you've grown quite a bit in your absence these last 2 years, Celine said with praise. Compared to that simpering 10-year-old boy that arrived on my doorstep, you've come a long way. Really, Master? William asked with a smug expression on his face. Yes. But, it is still far from being able to beat the geniuses of the elven race. At most, you will only last a minute in a direct confrontation with one of them. William frowned. He didn't want to believe that he wasn't a match for any of the geniuses of the elven race. With his current power, he was very confident that no one of the same age as him would be able to beat him in a one-on-one battle. You think a half-baked boy like you can fight against geniuses that have trained since they were young? Celine asked in contempt. You think that having a crash course of a year in monk training, and 7 months of archer training, is enough for you to beat an elven prodigy? You're far too naive, boy. Elves inherit the blessing of the world tree. When they reach the age of 6, their physical abilities are already comparable to silver-ranked fighters. Compared to the starting point of human children, the elves are much more superior. William snorted. If the elves were so strong and superior, then why did they have to ask for a mere human to help them to fight against the demon race? If they were so strong, then why did they almost become slaves to the demons? Master, your elven race is not as strong as you think it is. William thought that Celine would be angered and lash out at him, so he was surprised when the latter only smiled and nodded her head. Yes, Celine replied. Back then, the elves had no choice but to lower their heads and dignity to ask others for help. Do you know the reason why? I don't. Well then, little Will, allow me to tell you the reason why the elven race almost lost the war a year before you were born. The reason why they had to humble themselves during that time is because the world tree was dying. The proud and arrogant race had lost the blessing of the world tree and their power had been greatly weakened. When the demon race got wind of this, they immediately launched their invasion to conquer the Silver Moon continent while the elves were at their weakest. William listened seriously to Celine's story because he wanted to know everything about the Silver Moon continent, the place where his mother and father were currently staying. The funny thing about this whole event was that due to your father's sacrifice, the dying world tree became healthy again. I'm sure that the Elven Council didn't expect such a boon to happen when they invited your father to help them fight against the demon race. Naturally, they also didn't know your father was so good at conquering women that the saint had fallen head over heels for him. Both were unexpected outcomes, but for the elves, the world tree was more important than their saint. There were already plans to replace your mother as the guardian of the world tree, but the tree rejected the saint candidates they presented. Perhaps it was due to your father's lingering emotions, or perhaps the world tree cares for his current guardian. This was why, until this day, your mother is still the saint of the elven race despite the fact that she has given birth to a half-elf. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. Celine sighed as she looked at the young boy in front of her. After the world tree recovered its vitality, the elves of the Silver Moon continent also recovered their strength and arrogance. William, you are the son of the hero and the saint who saved the elven race. However, many ancient families bear a grudge against your father for marrying their saint. Celine didn't continue because William understood her meaning. Since they couldn't do anything to his mother, they would shift their attention to him. This was why his beautiful master told him that the Elven Council wouldn't give him time to grow up. They were afraid that he would become just like his father, someone with domineering strength that could threaten their existence. Of course, the majority of elves treated William's father, Maxwell, as a hero and idolized him. The same could be said for his mother, Arwen. However, the elves who were greedy for power and position, hated them for their influence. Even though the Ainarian family was the current head of the council, there were still many elders who were dissatisfied with the current status quo. William, if you don't want to die, become stronger than your father, Celine said. Surpass him and the elven race will have no choice but to listen to your demands. That is the way of this world. The strong will always have the last say in every matter. Pep talk is over, let's fight. William was also not in the mood to talk after realizing that the Elven Council was a bunch of hypocrites. The only thing on his mind was to become strong. Strong enough to ensure that his fated reunion with his mother and father would not be a pipe dream. When William opened his eyes, he found himself alone on Celine's bed. The things that had happened inside his sea of consciousness were still fresh on his mind. The young boy sighed in his heart because his master's training regimen was still as brutal as always. He was about to get off the bed when he realized one important thing, and that was, he couldn't move his body. William had experienced a similar feeling when he was still in the temple after clearing the trial of courage, so he didn't panic and handled the situation calmly. System, can you analyze my current condition? There's no need to analyze the host's current condition. What you are experiencing right now is the spiritual backlash from your training within the sea of consciousness. How long before I can move my body? 2 hours, 40 minutes, and 21 seconds. William sighed internally. Celine had already told him the purpose of his training. It was to develop his fighting style with his spear and to strengthen his soul against spiritual attacks. The beautiful elf reminded him that there were spiritual masters that could bypass the defenses of the body so they could just focus on attacking a person's soul. Celine was training William to resist such attacks, and allow him a chance of survival if his sea of consciousness were invaded by spirits who wanted to corrupt his soul. While the boy was thinking of ways to pass his time, the door of the room opened and Celine entered with a mischievous smile on her face. She was carrying a few tools in her hand, and William could tell with a glance that his beautiful master was up to no good. Chapter 103, Master, I miss you. Master, what are you doing? Writing. Writing what exactly? Make a wild guess, Celine said as she used a brush to write runic characters on William's arm. The boy was currently in a state of paralysis and only his head could move. Perhaps, Celine had known this would happen, so she decided to take this opportunity to practice her runic calligraphy on a living, breathing, canvas. After finishing the runic writing on William's arms, Celine proceeded to write on William's chest. The black rose tattoo in the center of the boy's chest served as the centerpiece of the beautiful elf's runic writing. Celine's brush strokes sent a tingling sensation down William's spine. It was as if every stroke contained some kind of ancient power that was slowly being embedded inside his body. With every rune that finished, William could feel some vague changes inside him that he couldn't explain. These changes were more on the spiritual side of things that made him feel unbalanced. After writing on his chest, Celine proceeded to write on his legs, until she reached the boy's feet. This writing session ended after 2.5 hours. Celine stood up and admired her masterpiece with a satisfied smile. William's body was covered with blue runic letters that were glowing slightly. After making sure that everything was in order, the beautiful elf placed her right hand over the rose tattoo on William's chest while softly saying a chant. William was not familiar with the language that his master was using, but for some reason it was making him feel drowsy. Soon, the boy dozed off as the runes on his body started to glow brightly. Absorption, Celine said with a serious expression. All the glowing runes floated in the air for a few seconds before falling back onto William's body and disappearing under his skin. Beads of sweat streamed down the sides of Celine's face as she finished one of the most complicated reinforcement spells that was taught to her by her own master. Oliver appeared inside the room with a worried expression as he stared at Celine, who was still panting for breath. Mistress, are you all right? Oliver asked. Should I bring you a rejuvenation potion? That sounds wonderful, Oliver, Celine replied. I'd like to have one, please. Give me a moment. Oliver lifted his talon and drew a circle in the air. Find the new ST ovals on n/felbin.com. A medium-sized bottle that contained a purple liquid appeared in the air. It slowly floated towards Celine, and the latter caught it with a shaky hand. The toll it took on my body surpassed my calculations, Celine mused as she drank the potion in her hand. The sweet invigorating liquid entered her lips and a soothing feeling washed over her body. It made her feel drowsy, so she decided to lay down on the bed beside the sleeping half-elf. The pitiful William became Celine's hug pillow, as she, too, fell asleep due to exhaustion. Oliver watched the master and disciple pair with gentle eyes. Little Will, you're so lucky that you chose my mistress as your master, Oliver thought as he left the room. He calculated that the two would wake up at around lunchtime, so it was up to him to prepare the food for the two hungry people who would wake up in a few hours. When William opened his eyes for the second time of the day, he found his face pressed against something soft like a marshmallow. It was also at that moment when a flowery fragrance entered his nose, which put him into a daze. It didn't take long for him to realize his current situation, and he didn't know if he should be happy or not with the unexpected development. At least cup C, William thought as the soft mounds pressed against his face. Celine was currently using him as a hug pillow, and her deep sleeper breaths tickled William's ears. If the lady lying next to him was not his master, William would no doubt appreciate his situation more. Unfortunately, it was his crazy master, and William couldn't predict how she would react if she discovered that the young boy's face was currently resting on her proud peaks. Before William could think of a way to escape his predicament, Celine's eyes opened without warning. She stared at William still half asleep before covering her lips to yawn. Good morning, Master, William greeted. Good morning, Celine replied. She then loosened her grip on the boy's body as she slowly propped herself from the bed. She raised her arms to do some stretching exercises, before she left the bed to go down to the dining room to eat. William felt complicated as he watched the door of the room close. Half of him was disappointed that the softness disappeared, while the other half was sad because Celine treated him like a child and not a man. I'm so stupid, William thought as he rubbed his face with both his hands. My body is still that of a 12-year-old kid. Of course, Master will not think of me as a man with my current age. William's stomach chose that moment to remind the boy that it was hungry. The boy placed the stupid thoughts at the back of his mind and joined his master for lunch. Will, what do you know about aura? Celine asked after she finished eating her lunch. Aura. William frowned. Sorry, Master. I don't know anything in regards to aura. I see. Celine propped her beautiful face using the palm of her hands. I had a feeling that Dwayne didn't have the time to add aura training in your exercises due to the limited time frame. However, don't worry, I'll make sure that you learn how to use your aura as a substitute for your lack of magic power. William tilted his head to the side as he looked at his master. Is Master talking about those auras that envelop Super Saiyans in Dragon Ball Z? If yes, that would be so freaking awesome. Celine didn't know what the young boy was thinking because she was preparing to explain what an aura was to her disciple. Will, an aura is the energy that surrounds a person's body. Celine started her explanation. Sword masters call their aura, sword aura. The sword aura allows their sword to become harder, sharper, and even allow itself to block magical attacks to a certain extent. Once a sword master has become proficient in the control of his aura, he then trains his sword intent. The sword intent allows him to manipulate the sword aura to execute energy-based attacks, and other feats that are impossible for those who have not yet awakened their aura, like cutting a mountain in half. A/N, in short, sword aura is Super Saiyan's mode, but with weapons. Sword intent is Bank *I mode in Bleach. Celine paused to allow William to digest her explanation. You can even say that what separates the rookies from the expert warriors is the ability to use aura. It's like a form of graduation for them. From a swordsman, to a knight, to a Templar. Knights can use sword aura to a certain extent, but it is only at the beginner level. Templars on the other hand are stronger and can perform powerful sword strikes that can cut reinforced steel in half like a hot knife cutting through butter. Celine gave William an arrogant look before continuing her explanation. The purpose of the runes I inscribed on your body earlier was to increase your sensitivity by 100-fold. This will help you feel the flow of aura in your body, and allow you to understand how to wield it. William patted his shoulder then his hand. He couldn't feel the increased sensitivity that Celine was talking about. Celine watched William's actions with an amused expression. You need to say a special word that serves as the password to activate the increased sensitivity in your body. I will not tell you this word now, because I still haven't prepared the right environment for our training. It would be far too dangerous if you activated it at this point in time. Then, when will we start our aura training? William inquired. His eyes were sparkling in anticipation because he wanted to experience what it was like to become a Super Saiyan. Tonight, Celine replied with a smile. You are free to wander around for the time being, but be sure to return before sunset. You still need to cook dinner. Celine stood up and walked towards the stairs leading to the basement. I will prepare the venue for our training. Make sure not to disturb me unless it is important. Yes. Celine needed to prepare the venue for their training. Learning how to form auras would usually take 2 to 3 years, but she and William didn't have that much free time on their hands. What she needed to do was use the special artifact that was given to her by her master before she left the northern continent once her training had finished. Master, did you give me this artifact in preparation for this day? Celine thought. Her master was a powerful sorcerer who was also proficient in future sight. Although she didn't say anything about why she handed her prized artifact to Celine, the beautiful elf had a nagging feeling that her master had peeked into her future. Master, I miss you, Celine sighed as she held the golden pendant that was hanging on her neck. It was the gift that she received from her master when she officially became her disciple. The beautiful elf wished that there would come a time when she would be able to see her beloved master once again, before the elven prophecy came to pass. Chapter 104, Aura Training Part 1. Oliver, I'll leave the house in your hands. Worry not, mistress, I'll make sure that nothing interrupts your training with little Will. Celine nodded her head and proceeded to go downstairs. She had just made the finishing touches for her planned 2 months training with her disciple, and only conversed with Oliver to give him some orders while she and William went into seclusion. Do you think that William will be able to endure it, mistress? Oliver inquired. I still think it's too early for this. We're on the same page, Oliver. Celine paused her footsteps before nodding her head in agreement. But, time waits for no one. The sooner Will finishes his training, the less worried I'll be when he leaves Lant. The parrot monkey sighed. Oliver knew that Celine was right. This was the only way to boost William's strength with the limited time they had. He just hoped that the boy would be able to endure the training that Celine had specially prepared for him. William was currently in the living room. He was waiting for Celine to finish her conversation with Oliver. After hearing that they would go into seclusion for 2 months, the young boy felt anxious and excited at the same time. Due to his uneasiness, he paced around the room in order to calm his nerves for the training that was about to come. New N0vel chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/co/M. A few minutes later, he heard Celine's footsteps coming down from the stairway and immediately stopped his anxious pacing. He stared at his beautiful master, while trying to keep a calm expression on his face. Are you ready? Celine asked. Yes, William replied. We can start anytime, master. Good. Celine nodded and beckoned for William to follow her. The two entered the basement together and headed to a secret passage that William had never seen before. Celine didn't say anything as he led her one and only disciple to a small room that was devoid of anything. It was just an enclosed space, yet William could feel energy fluctuations around him. Celine gave him a reassuring smile as she waved her hand. In front of them, a silver door appeared out of nowhere. The beautiful elf casually opened it and motioned for William to enter. The boy obeyed without asking any questions. William knew better than to question his master about every little thing that she did. Just beyond the door, a blue ocean and sky that spanned for as far as the eye could see surrounded William on all sides. He scanned his surroundings, but didn't feel anything unusual except for the fact that this reminded him of his sea of consciousness. Master, where are we? William asked. We are currently inside a divine artifact called Eternity, Celine replied. This is the place where we will be spending close to 4 years together. Huh? Master, what do you mean 4 years? Aren't we supposed to only stay in seclusion for 2 months? Yes and no. In the outside world, we will only be spending 2 months in seclusion. However, inside this divine artifact a day is equivalent to only an hour on the outside world. Meaning, a single day outside is equivalent to 24 days here. Celine patted the boy's head. In the span of 3 years and 9 months, you must learn how to manifest and use your aura. Do I make myself clear? If I am unable to learn it? William inquired. Celine smiled sweetly. It reminded William of the days where he was tortured until he almost went crazy. The boy knew that he better do his best to learn aura control or else he was going to regret it. Come. Celine sat cross-legged on the ocean and made a gesture for William to follow suit. William understood her intention, so he immediately sat cross-legged, facing her. He had already prepared himself mentally, so he waited for his master's order attentively. The password to raise your sensitivity is exceed break, Celine explained. Take note that after you activate the runes, your body's sensitivity will increase 100-fold. If you want to cancel its effects, just say exceed off. Do you understand? Yes. William nodded. Very well, activate the seal, Celine ordered. Exceed break. William muttered. Just as soon as the words left his lips, the runes that had embedded themselves inside the boy's body glowed in unison. William immediately felt a drastic change in his senses as his mind was overwhelmed by the sensations that washed over his body. We will now proceed with the first phase of your training, Celine said via telepathy. Since William's sensitivity had now increased by 100-fold, she was afraid that her voice might be strong enough to shatter his eardrum. For now, focus to see if you can feel any form of energy in your body. William closed his eyes and focused his attention on his body. It didn't take long before he could hear and feel the beating of his own heart. Soon, the thumping sound resounded in his ear like a steady rhythm. As the boy listened to his heart, he felt that his consciousness was turning hazy. What he didn't know was that his consciousness was starting to merge with his body when Celine's voice reached his mind. Do not lose yourself and let your mind wander, Celine cautioned. Focus and comprehend the flow of energy in your body. Let that guide you to better understand the vessel that houses your soul. Only then will you be able to feel the aura that envelopes your entire being. William followed Celine's instructions to the best of his abilities, but aside from the steady rhythm of his heart, he couldn't perceive anything else. More like, his heart was overwhelming his other senses and prevented them from sensing anything else. Celine looked at the young boy in front of her with a knowledgeable gaze. She had also undergone this training and fully understood what William was going through. A week passed, within the divine artifact, Eternity, and yet only 7 hours had passed in the outside world. William was still sitting cross-legged as he tried to feel any form of energy that surrounded his body. He had made very little progress within the past week. There was a time when he felt a strand of energy flowing over his arms, but it disappeared after William lost his concentration. He had tried to grasp that same sensation again, but the feeling had eluded him for days. Finally, on the 8th day, he felt something at the tip of his fingertips. The red-headed boy channeled all of his concentration on that spot as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. William tried to grasp the elusive form that was struggling at the tip of his fingertips with every bit of willpower he had. An hour passed, and the boy's body was already drenched in sweat. He did everything within his power, but still failed in the end. William's body almost fell forward due to exhaustion, but Celine had been prepared to support his body using magic. Exceed off, William muttered as he panted for breath. Sweat streamed down the side of his face like a river, as he clenched his fist in frustration. Let's take a break first, Celine said as she placed an orange potion in front of William. Here, take this nourishing supplement. William thanked Celine and slowly drank the potion. This potion was a nutritional potion that Owen had made for the two of them. Its purpose was to prevent the two of them from feeling hungry for a week, while still gaining sufficient nutrients to allow their body to function properly. Master, how long did it take you to feel the aura in your body? William inquired. 5 days, Celine answered. 5 days, William felt depressed. It had already been more than a week and he could only barely feel the aura in his body. He finally realized that his master was truly exceptional among the elven race. Don't feel down. Seeing William's expression, Celine decided to encourage him. The only reason why I was able to learn it that fast was because I was born a genius. For ordinary elves, it takes them at least a month or two before they succeed in understanding the flow of their aura. But, I believe that you can learn it faster. After all, you are my disciple. Master, is there another way? William inquired. If there is, even though it will be painful, I am willing to do it. HOH? Are you sure about that? Celine smirked. Do you think you can handle it? I don't know if I can handle it or not, but I won't know until I try. Very well. I'm also curious if you will be able to endure it as well. 10 minutes later, William's laughter resounded within the world of eternity. If others were to hear it, they would think that the one laughing was truly very happy. However, reality was different. William was currently laughing with tears trickling down his face, snot running down his nose, and saliva dripping at the corners of his mouth. Clearly, Celine's alternative way to help William feel his aura made the boy completely lose his marbles. Chapter 105, Aura Training Part 2. That's it for now, Celine said as she stopped moving the feather in her hand. William was not in the right state of mind because his thoughts were currently scattered. Celine's plan was simple. She would imitate the flow of aura on a person's body by using a feather, so that William could feel its circulation. However, since the boy's sensitivity was multiplied by 100-fold, he wasn't able to stop himself from laughing out loud as the ticklish sensation overwhelmed his senses. When William finally regained his bearings, he wiped his face clean from filth. He was feeling embarrassed of making a fool of himself in front of his beautiful master. When all traces of his embarrassment were removed, he then faced his master to complain. Master, this is a very dangerous thing to do, William said with a very serious expression. The sensitivity is too much. I can still feel the lingering traces of the feather on my skin and it makes my heart tremble. Very well, I will use this as a means in the future to interrogate you. It seems very effective, Celine said in a teasing tone. But joke aside, why don't you use that lingering feeling to feel the flow of aura? William paused before saying exceed break in order to feel his body. Like he said earlier, the traces of Celine's feather experiment were still gnawing on his skin. It made the boy realize that by using those lingering feelings, he was able to finally feel the elusive sensation that he had been grasping for a week. The boy didn't waste any more time and focused his concentration to feel the flow of energy passing through every part of his body. A few minutes later, William had entered a trance-like state. Celine had a smile on her face because she could tell that William had finally grasped the flow of aura in his body. A year passed and the sound of weapons clashing echoed within William's sea of consciousness. After the half-elf had learned to channel the aura in his body to his weapon, Celine decided to go to the next phase of their training. Although William could empower his weapon with his aura, it was only at a very basic level. What Celine was currently trying to teach him was the way to manipulate the aura into a form that would suit his battle style. Celine teleported in front of William and thrust her spear forward. The boy bent his neck to the side to allow the spear to pass by. He thought that it was enough to neutralize her attack, but the beautiful elf only smiled at him. Little Will, you're still too green, Celine teased as she pulled her weapon back. The two parted a few meters away from each other as William looked at his master with a serious expression. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger to it. Suddenly, his vision tilted to the side as his head slid off his neck. A few minutes later, William stared at his master in disbelief. The spear in Celine's hand had turned into a death scythe, and was the main culprit why his head was cut off earlier. Follow EU stories at n/VELB/in.com. You can also use your aura to change the form of your weapon at will, Celine explained. What you saw was only a simple application of aura intent. As long as you master aura and aura intent, you will be able to fight even when you find yourself without any weapons. Celine tucked the hair blocking her face behind the back of her ear as she continued her explanation. It's a shame that Dwayne wasn't able to show you how he manipulates his aura. That bald monk has one of the scariest martial intents that I have seen in the southern continent. Third Master. William frowned. What kind of martial intent does the Third Master have? Celine raised an eyebrow. Well, I guess I can allow you to call him Third Master since he taught you quite well in the year that the two of you were together. As for what kind of martial intent he has, you should ask him this question yourself. How about you, Master? William inquired. What kind of martial intent do you have? Do you want to see it? Celine grinned. I can show it to you, but it will be a very, very painful experience. Are you sure you still want to see it? Forget that I asked, Master. Good choice. After that short intermission, both of them clashed once more. William was trying to find a way to use his aura so that he could at least not be at a disadvantage. Celine was also kind enough to teach him how to form a defensive barrier using his aura against magical attacks. However, William's aura could only withstand first circle magic attacks. If someone were to use a fireball against him, his aura shield would immediately be destroyed and the half-elf would be burned to a crisp. 2 years after William and Celine entered the divine artifact Eternity, Stormacaller flew in the air and engaged Celine in close combat. As Celine was trying to fend off the lightning-imbued spear, several whistling sounds reached her ear. The beautiful elf kicked Stormacaller aside and twirled her spear behind her in order to deflect the arrows that William had shot at her from her rear. A mischievous smile appeared on Celine's face as she took a step forward towards the half-elf who was about to shoot another arrow in her direction. William's perception had warned him about Celine's arrival, so he immediately released the arrow before jumping backwards. Celine reappeared just in time to bend her head to the side to allow the arrow to pass harmlessly at the side of her neck. The next second she was already behind William, and delivered a powerful kick on the boy's back without any shred of mercy. Sounds of bones breaking were heard as Celine broke the boy's spine in half. The half-elf's body skidded across the ground for a few meters before coming to a complete halt. A few minutes later, William stood up from the ground with a pained expression. He had suffered countless times over the past 2 years, but there was not a single instance where he had managed to land even a scratch on his master's body. Even so, he was quite happy with his improvement. The aura intent that he had developed was to coat his weapon with his aura and turn it to a living weapon that could autonomously attack his enemies. William had the option to control this weapon with his will, or let it attack automatically. This gave the boy an increase in his offensive power by using his vow to fire long-range attacks, while his enemy was trying to deal with his spear weapon. Due to his aura being at the initial stage, William was only able to control one weapon at a time. He could also only control this weapon up to a 300-meter radius away from him. "Shall we take a break, or do you want to continue?" Celine asked. "Let's take a short break, Master," William pleaded while trying to straighten his aching back. Although they were fighting using their souls, they could still feel pain. The ironic part was that since it was a soul battle, the pain was multiplied by 2. Due to the constant beatings he received, William's spiritual resistance had also increased dramatically. This was another hidden trump card that his master had prepared for him in case that he ever found himself fighting against a spirit master. "Master, right now, am I able to fight against those elven prodigies you were talking about?" William asked. "With your current abilities, you can perhaps last 10 minutes, Celine answered without batting an eye. "Consider it an achievement if you can last for more than 12 minutes against an elven prodigy." William scratched his head in disappointment as he sat opposite of his master. Deep down, he was really itching to fight against one of these so-called elven prodigies and see if his master was only making fun of him or not. Still, he was happy that he was able to train using a divine artifact. If he were to train in the outside world for 2 years, he would be left in the dust by those who had been trained with vast resources at an early age. Of course, if he hadn't lost his powers, and his ring of conquest was still working like it used to, William knew that there was no genius that he couldn't beat. In the games that he had played, William usually beat every boss because of the massive level difference. Even if the boss was resistant to fire, he would still be able to kill it with fire attacks due to being overleveled. It was a strategy that some gamers used in order to beat down an opponent that was stronger than them. Unfortunately for William, his magic power and dungeon was out of commission. Even so, for the red-headed boy, it was a blessing in disguise. If he hadn't lost his magic power and his ability to gain massive experience in the dungeon, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to train his martial skills. If William were given a chance to return to the past, he would have done the same thing all over again. For he knew that at the end of the day, without a good foundation, he was just like a tall building that was built using cheap materials. A building that could collapse anytime without any warnings whatsoever. Chapter 106, Aura Training Part 3. William and Celine had been inside the divine artifact for 3 years and 2 months. The half-elf had spent the first 2 years awakening his aura and forming his own aura intent. After he managed to infuse his aura on his spear, Celine had focused on honing his ability to keep his aura in battle for as long as possible. Celine was amused at William's resourcefulness and even praised him for being able to accomplish such a feat. After 2 years of aura training, William finally focused on his spearmanship training. The spear's primary attack is the thrust, Celine explained as she thrust her spear straight at William's face, stopping 2 inches away from his nose. The spear's main advantage is its long reach. If you were to use it to slash at people, then you're better off using a sword. Remember, thrust first, slash later. Thrust first, slash later, William repeated as he nodded his head in acknowledgement. When you aim your spear at your enemy, aim it at their face. Not their chest, not their stomach, not their legs, but their face, Celine continued her explanation. The reason? It allows you less openings, and your spear point would act as a deterrent. Basically, you're telling them that you'll hit them before they hit you. Celine then showed William how to properly hold the spear. Her right hand was holding the rear end of the spear, while her left hand firmly held the middle of the handle. The basic attack of the spear is the short thrust. Celine demonstrated a short thrust for William to see. When you pull back the spear, do not lower the spear head because it creates an opening. It must remain pointing at your opponent's face at all times. She repeated the move a few more times and asked William to do his own short spear thrusts. I've noticed that, when you use your spear, you make wide slashes, which is not really the way to properly use it. In close quarters, the short thrust will be your friend. All you need to do is match it with good footwork and your opponent will definitely get a headache when they fight against you. The next thing you need to learn is the long-range thrust. When you extend your thrust, your right hand needs to move up to underneath your armpit. Same rules apply. When you pull your spear back, it should still be pointing at your enemy's face. Remember, the spear is made to thrust, not to slash. Your primary objective should be to poke your target to death and not use wide swings that leave your body open for counterattacks. Even in mounted combat, you will still use the thrust more than the slash. William raised his hand to ask a question. Master, then when do we slash our opponents? Good question, Celine smiled. Usually, we slash when our thrust is deflected. When the thrust is deflected upwards, we need to recover our stance, and that is why we slash downwards. Of course, we can also initiate a slashing attack if we want to, but there are two things that you have to keep in mind when you do a slash. The first thing you need to remember is that when you slash, your slash shouldn't go past the center of your body. What does that mean? It meant that your spear blade should never point downwards. You mustn't slash your spear all the way to the ground, because that is not how spears are used. Those who do that are amateurs. She then showed William how a slash was made. After that she showed him a combination of slashes and thrusts in rapid succession. It was a very deadly combination, if used effectively, because the possibility of poking your enemy's eye out using that combination attack was very high. The beautiful elf then resumed a fighting stance and showed William another option. Of course, there are other alternatives that you can do when your thrust is deflected. The blunt end of your spear is not just for how. It is also used to block and counterattack when your thrust is deflected. The key here is hand position and control. When your thrust is deflected, you can move your hand and position the spear to either block an attack, or hit your opponent's body part such as their joints, knees, or hips, to catch them off balance. Celine demonstrated the block and counterattacks that he could use using the bottom end of the spear in order to regain the fighting stance and continue fighting. After showing William how to block effectively using the spear, the two once again engaged in a sparring match which helped William increase his proficiency with his spear mastery and, of course, gain experience points at the same time. In the past, William thought that he could only level up his job classes by killing monsters in the dungeon. He didn't know that constant repetition also gave enough experience to level up the job class as long as it was done properly. When William showed Celine the monkey staff technique that Dwayne had imparted to him, the dark sorceress laughed and said that it could be used as an effective means of attack if William's defenses were breached. Upted chapters and nfelben.com. Basically, what Celine was saying is just let go of your spear and switch to your monk class and pummel your opponent with punches until he doesn't recognize east from west. William scratched his head because he couldn't refute Celine's comment. Then William's repetition training began. Short thrusts, short and long thrust combinations, and slash and thrust combinations. Celine also paid extra attention to William's footwork. The spearman job class has the battle art called the Relentless Dragon Spear Art. William was quite fascinated with this spear art because, unlike the Prince of Thunder's Lightning God War art that focused on killing strikes, the Relentless Dragon Spear art focused on close combat spear techniques and cavalier spear techniques. It was a spear art that was commonly used by dragoons and Templars in the central continent. The young boy's main weapon was the wooden staff, so learning this war art was a good option for him. He would only use the Lightning God War art as killing blows because most of them were one-shot techniques. William spent his remaining time inside the Divine Artifact Eternity, perfecting his spear art until his spearman job class reached its max level. Celine also made sure that he didn't slack off in the rest of his training. Their routine was simple: spear training during the day, and dark magic resistance training during the night. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it hellish training by normal standards. These days continued and William spent each day in pain and suffering. Then, the day that William had been waiting for finally arrived. Celine finally gave him the nod of approval to end their almost 4 years of training. If they were to add all the years he had spent inside Eternity, then the red-headed boy would already be 16 years of age. However, no changes could be seen in his face or body. Celine was the same and she was still as young and beautiful as the day she had stepped inside the basement of her house. Master, thank you for everything. William gave Celine a very respectful bow. It is my duty as your master to supervise your training, Celine replied with a calm expression. Go and stay with your family for a few days, because your next instructor will be arriving shortly. I have more training to do. William blinked in confusion. How come? Celine cupped the boy's face as she looked at him with a serious expression. I don't know if your grandfather is right or wrong about his decision to ask that man to become your instructor. However, I do think that you need his teaching in order to survive in this world. The beautiful elf lightly pinches William's cheeks before letting go. I just hope that you will still retain some of your innocence when his lessons are done. Although I want you to become strong and powerful, I don't want you to become cold and indifferent. I still prefer this stupid version of you. William massaged his cheeks as he looked up to his master with a frown. Master, I'm not stupid. It's just a figure of speech, Celine snorted. Go, spend some time with your family because you will be leaving Lont soon. William was still half in doubt, but he still nodded his head in acknowledgement. Celine and Oliver watched the boy's retreating figure through the window and sighed. Mistress, I like this version of William. If possible, I don't want him to experience such an ordeal, Oliver said. Me, too, Celine replied. But change is the only permanent thing in this world. Let's just wait for his return. We can think of a way to help after he finishes his next lesson. Oliver closed his eyes and sighed one more time. Tough times don't last. Tough people do. Celine had already done her best for William. It was now time to pass the torch to others. However, the one to whom the torch had been passed on was someone who thrived in the darkness. In a place where darkness reigned supreme, a burning torch was no different from a small candle whose light would be snuffed out by the swaying of the wind. Please, have mercy? I won't do it again, a middle-aged man begged as he looked at the man approaching him with dread. What do you want? Money? Women? Authority? I can give it to you. Just spare my life. I beg you. The man wearing a hood walked towards the middle-aged man with silent footsteps. Due to the hood covering his face, no one could tell if he was handsome or not. The man in question didn't care for such trivialities. The only thing he needed to do was carry out his work, as ordered by his liege. Please, I beg you. The man wasn't able to finish his sentence, for the hooded man pierced his chest with a short sword in one swift motion. The middle-aged man died with his eyes wide open and staring at the starry skies. For a brief moment, before his death, his eyes showed fear and regret before they clouded over as his life left his body. I find no joy in this, but there is no other way, the hooded man said. Requiescat in pace. A/N, rest in peace. The hooded man walked away, disappearing in the darkness of the night. Having finished his task, it was now time for him to return to Lant, where his new mission was waiting for him. Chapter 107, Bell of Anthanasia. It was the second day after William had finished his training with Celine. He had just finished his daily martial arts routine and was waiting for the sun to rise from the east. I wonder what Mama is doing right now, William thought as he took off his shirt and started to wipe his body with a towel. He hadn't seen Ella for the past 2 years and his grandpa only told him that she was busy training along with the rest of his herd. After he finished drying himself off, William sat on the hill as the first rays of sunlight peeked from behind the hill to the east. Watching the sunrise and sunset had become a habit in this lifetime. It reminded him of the days back on Earth when he had missed many beautiful opportunities because of his illness. While gazing at the sunrise, he heard the familiar sound of receiving a notification from the system. Ding! You've received mail from the God Shop. Mail. William muttered as he opened his inbox from his God Shop. This was the very first time he had received mail from the system and he was very curious about its contents. He read the mail and was surprised when he saw that there was an attachment included in it. To our beloved patron. The God of Shepherd is currently celebrating his 3021 St. birthday. Due to this, His Excellency David had decided to send gifts to his close friends and acquaintances. As the #1 provider of God-tier artifacts since time immemorial, the God Shop was tasked to send the gods gifts free of charge. Enclosed within this mail is the artifact Bell of Anthanasia, courtesy of the God of Shepherd. It is a special artifact that is said to give happiness to the one who wears it. P.S. All goods delivered by the God Shop are in perfect condition. We will not accept claims and refunds for any damaged or defective goods. We don't handle that sh*t. Did you like our services? Please leave us a review on our website. We will automatically delete 3 stars reviews and below. Anyone who dares to leave bad reviews will be cursed with not being able to raise their PPS ever again. Yours truly, God Shop Manager. Serving you since time immemorial. Bell of Anthanasia. William summoned the bell from the God Shop and used his appraisal skill to check its information. Bell of Anthanasia. This bell used to belong to Amalthea, who was sometimes called the Tender Goddess. She left the bell in the care of the God of Shepherds when she rose to the starry skies to become a constellation. Grants +10 enhancement bonus to all stats. Nourishes the wearer's body to always keep it healthy. Grants immunity to poison. Enhances the effect of all nurturing skills. Grants. Form. Visjate and Felbin. CM for new updates. William read the information and agreed that it was a very good artifact. However, there were some question marks included in the information and he had no idea what it meant. System, is there something wrong with my appraisal skill? To answer the host's question, the level of the appraisal skill you currently possess is unable to translate the information of the artifact completely. This is a very normal thing, especially for sacred or divine artifacts that belong to deities and gods. I see. William nodded his head in understanding. I'm sure that Sir David would not do something detrimental to me. I forgot, I need to greet him with a happy birthday as well. William replied to the mail of the manager of the God Shop and respectfully asked him to pass a message to the God of Shepherds. William thanked David in his letter and greeted him with a happy birthday. He also apologized and promised to make an offering the next time he went to a temple as thanks for David's generosity. After sending his reply, he once again looked at the bell in his hand. From all angles, it looked like an ordinary silver bell with no special features. If not for the information he got from the appraisal skill, William would think that he was pranked by the God Shop. Me. A familiar greeting reverberated in the air and William hurriedly stood and looked at the direction where the call came from. There, he saw Ella running towards him in haste. William grinned and ran towards his mama and the two were finally reunited after 2 years of separation. Mama, I missed you. Me. How have you been? Me. The two chatted for a long time as they asked each other what they had been doing for the past 2 years that they were not together. Ella told him that she and the other goats trained with Marcus and Thunder in the northern part of the Helland Kingdom. She added that there were also many Angarayan war ibexes in the place where they trained. William listened to Ella's story and frowned when he heard that they were treated as outsiders in the beginning. She even complained that they were attacked a couple of times by the leader of the herd of the ibexes who demanded that they submit to him. Naturally, none of the goats agreed to its demands because they already belonged to William's herd. That was where the problem started and they were continuously harassed during their training. Not only by the goats, but the tribes who lived in that region as well. Of course, Ella and the other goats tried to fight back, but they were severely outnumbered. There were only 14 of them, and their enemies numbered in the thousands. How could they possibly win? Fortunately, Marcus was with them and Ella told the red-headed boy that the senior shepherd of Lant had a long talk with the chief of the tribe. After their talk, none of the war ibexes and the members of the tribe harassed them ever again. This allowed the goats to train in the harsh environment of the northern region where blizzards and hailstorms happened on a regular basis. In turn, William told Ella his training with Owen, Trent, Dwayne, and Celine. Naturally, he downplayed the harshness of the training in order to not make Ella upset. The two talked for a long time until it was almost lunchtime. Mama, I have something for you. Me. This is a divine artifact and I want you to have it, Mama. William presented the silver bell to Ella and rang it a few times. Me. Ella bleated softly when she saw the bell. Her instinct was telling her that it was a very precious object and she felt touched that William was planning to give it to her. The bell was attached to a silver collar that automatically adjusted its size to accommodate its wearer. William lovingly adjusted the collar on Ella's neck and secured it in place. Mama, do you feel any discomfort? Ella shook her head and licked William's cheeks in reply. I need to go back to Master's house to cook her lunch. How about you, Mama? Me. All right, let's meet later this afternoon. William nodded. Ella told him that she would go and look after the other members of William's herd who were currently grazing in the valley near Lant. She was the only one who returned to the town because she wanted to see how William was doing. William gave Ella one last hug before he went to Celine's house. Ella, on the other hand, looked at William's retreating back with gentle eyes. She bleated softly to say her thank you, not to William, but to David who had made her remember the things that had happened in the distant past. A past, when the gods and mortals worked hand in hand, to build a paradise that she thought would last till the end of time. Somewhere in the Temple of the Gods. 3021 St birthday. Lily snorted. What a load of crap. Can't you just be honest and say that you wanted to give him a gift? Why do things in a roundabout manner? The lowly goddess was complaining because David had tricked William in believing that it was his birthday. Unfortunately, William had also forgotten that there were no birthday celebrants that sent gifts to other people during their birthdays. Usually, the ones that would be receiving gifts were the birthday celebrants and not the other way around. Lily, you are a new generation goddess. Don't you understand the concept of paying it forward? David asked. HMP? Paying it forward? Do you really think that I'm a gullible child? Lily answered in disdain. I know you're up to something. An old schemer like you doesn't do things without a reason. David played with his beard and grinned. You think too much, Lily. It was just a gift. So you say, but I still smell something fishy. Lily narrowed her eyes. David chuckled and walked away from the lowly goddess in order to escape her interrogation. Truth be told, the god of shepherds was only keeping the promise he made to his old friend, Amalthea. A promise that he had made thousands of years ago, when the universe was still young, and mankind was just starting to take its first steps towards the unknown. Chapter 108, Those Who Reside in the Darkness Part 1. A hooded man walked through the countryside until he arrived at a valley overlooking the town of Lant. The sun was just about to set, and the sky was dyed in an orange hue. The man paused to admire the setting sun for a full minute before continuing his journey. As he neared Lant, the Aurabro sensed his presence, but it turned a blind eye to the approaching man. He had already seen him countless times before, and he remembered his scent well. This hooded man would leave Lant for long periods of time, but whenever he returned, he would carry with him a strong scent of blood. Ezio gave the golden ape a brief nod before melding into the shadows. He made his way to the Ainsworth residence like a silent spectre, disturbing no one in his wake. When he reached the living room, he heard the giggle of a baby. Ezio smiled despite himself because his lord would always return to being a doting grandparent whenever he was around his granddaughter. It was the same for Matthew and William, but he could tell that James would spoil Eve rotten as she grew up. He offered a silent prayer to the fools who would dare to court the young lady when she reached adulthood. Ezio was sure that if Modred didn't kill them, James certainly would. He found his lord, writing a letter inside his room. Like always, Ezio would wait until James was finished with his task. He was not in a hurry and decided to meditate for the time being. A few minutes later, James finally finished his letter and called out to him. How did it go? James inquired. The right hand of the minister will no longer bother us, Ezio reported. If the minister is not a fool then he will know what to do. Well done. James nodded his head in approval. Rest for 2 days before you start your new assignment. I'm sure that you already know what it is, yes. Ezio nodded his head. If that is your will, my lord. Aren't you going to ask me why? No, I believe in the Lord's judgment. James tapped the armchair with a finger as he gazed at the hooded man who was kneeling in front of him. Show him the filth of humanity, James ordered. But, do not tell him what to do. Let him make his own decisions. Whether he does, or does not, is all up to him. I hear and obey, Ezio replied. All test novel on novelben/.cm. You may go now, by your will. After leaving the Ainsworth residence, Ezio made his way towards the one and only tavern in Lant, the Sleeping Forest. He removed his hood before walking inside the tavern. Ezio was now off duty, so there was no need for him to follow the strict creed that he had imposed upon himself. As always, he walked to the farthest stool at the bar and waited for the bartender to take his order. Will you be having the usual? The bartender of the Sleeping Forest, Ryan, asked as he wiped the glass cup in his hands. Yes, Ezio replied without even looking at him. Ryan nodded and took out a few bottles from the cabinet. A few seconds later, he was expertly mixing a cocktail. This was a special blend that was not served to the other customers in the tavern. The reason? None of them were strong enough to finish the drink. Only a handful of people in Lant appreciated this drink and Ezio was one of them. Ryan placed the cup in front of Ezio with a wink before returning to his station. Ezio muttered a word of thanks before taking a sip from the glass. The brown-haired man closed his eyes as he savored the burning sensation that spread inside his mouth, down his throat, and into his body. He wasn't able to stop the soft sigh of pleasure from escaping his lips as he bathed in the afterglow of his drink. Ezio stayed inside the tavern for an hour before walking out into the night. Like always, he strolled around the town of Lant without any destination in mind. For some reason, he found himself walking towards the south of Lant. It was a place he rarely visited, for he had no reason to go there. However, for some reason, something was pulling him to go in that direction. It was then when he saw him. A young boy was lying on a stack of hay while looking at the stars in the sky. Beside him was an Angarian goat whose head was resting on his chest. Ezio recognized him right away, because very few kids in Lant treated a goat in this manner. In his eyes, the boy was like a burning candle light in the darkness. A fragile light that could go out at any moment if the wind were to blow in its direction. Although he didn't question his lord's order, Ezio wondered what would happen if the boy's light were to suddenly disappear and be replaced by darkness. Would he still be the same carefree boy that laughed happily? The same boy that sang songs as he led his goats towards the valley to graze? Would he still look at the world with those clear, green eyes that shone like emeralds? Or would their radiance fade and be clouded by a haze as he lost his faith in humanity? Ezio wanted to know. He was dying to know. 1 month, Ezio thought. I will know the answer after a month. The brown-haired man retraced his steps and wandered through the night. His lord ordered him to rest, and that is what he was going to do. 2 days later, William stood inside the conference room with a serious expression plastered on his face. James had told him yesterday that his instructor had already arrived in Lant, and he was to go to the conference at midnight the next day to meet him. William's new instructor was currently standing in the corner of the room, dressed in black and wearing a hood. He was giving off the assassin vibe, and it was making the young boy feel very uncomfortable. Will, I would like to introduce you to your new instructor, Ezio, James said as he made a gesture to the man standing at the corner of the room. Ezio, you already know who William is. I hope the two of you get along from now on. Nice to meet you, Sir Ezio, William said with a smile. Likewise, Ezio replied. James patted William's shoulder with a serious expression. You will accompany Ezio as he completes his missions outside of Lant. You are free to act however you please, but you are not allowed to interfere with his work. Do I make myself clear? Yes. William nodded. Ezio, look after my grandson, James ordered. You already know what he's like. I'm sure that you're going to suffer a few headaches, but be more tolerant of him. As you command, my lord. Ezio gave James a respectful bow before turning towards William. Let's go, William. Time for you to start your training. Yes, Sir Ezio, William replied. The two left the residence under the cover of darkness. William had already said his goodbyes to his master, his mama Ella, his uncle Mordred, Aunt Anna, Aunt Helen, and his cute niece, Eve. The two had just left the town of Lant when Ezio initiated a conversation. You have already trained under several masters and I can tell that your overall fighting ability has reached the initial stages of gold rank, Ezio said as he continued to walk. Class D beasts pose no threat to you and to a certain extent you will be able to handle normal Class C beasts on your own. Ezio paused for a while before continuing his explanation. However, the greatest threat to you right now are humans, not monsters. Although I was supposed to be your instructor, I will not teach you anything unless you have fully committed yourself to take that next step. Until then, you will just observe on the sidelines. You are free to do anything you want as long as you don't get in the way of my mission. Do you understand? Yes, William replied. The boy had a vague idea what his new instructor was hinting at and it was already making his stomach churn. He hoped beyond hope that he was only overthinking things. Unfortunately for William, that small hope in his heart disappeared completely as his world was dyed red. Chapter 109, Those Who Reside in the Darkness Part 2. The thick scent of fear, despair, helplessness, and pain permeated the air as William looked at his blood-stained hands. Everything around him had fallen into chaos and fires ravaged every tent as far as the eyes could see. The crying of several infants could be heard nearby, as their mothers did their best to assure them that everything was going to be alright. Shouts filled with anger, curses, and heartbreak. Visjade and Felbin. CM for new updates. Laughter filled with ridicule and contempt. All of these merged together to create a ballad that had brought the red-headed boy to his knees. Overwhelmed with lightheadedness and nausea, William tried to wipe away the blood that had stained his hands, but instead of removing them, he only spread them further. Gwark. The young boy wasn't able to hold it back any longer as the smell of blood, piss, sweat, and excrement assaulted him from all sides. He vomited until he could vomit no more as tears streamed down his face. Roars, shouts, explosions, and weapons clashing against each other resounded throughout the encampment where the nomads of different tribes had gathered. William panted as he saw several men, carrying weapons, move in his direction. He wiped away the filth on his lips and forced himself to stand up. The young boy firmly held Stormacaller in his hands and took a step forward. The crying of the babies grew louder as their mothers shivered in fright. William stood in front of them with his weapon raised high. His legs were shaking due to exhaustion and discomfort, but he couldn't back down. He refused to back down. Alas, there were times when doing one's best was not enough. He had already gone above and beyond his limits in trying to keep this place safe. The red-headed boy had already reached the end of his rope. He could barely stand, but stand he did. For who else would do it in his place? None. That was why he needed to make his stand. William's small body was sent flying before finally skidding on the ground a few meters away from the women and children. He was a spent candle and there was no way for him to fend off the group of men, who had arrived at the makeshift shelter where the women and children of the tribe hid. Stormacaller crackled a few meters away from the fallen boy as tendrils of lightning hissed around its body. It was as if it was urging, pleading, for William to stand and protect everyone behind him. As much as the boy wanted to hear its call, he could no longer move his body. One of the men walked up to William, and stomped on his legs without mercy. The resounding sound of bones breaking and the young boy's pained cry echoed in the night. Laughing at his suffering, the man stomped on his arms, breaking them as well. That's enough. Don't kill him, one of the men said. He's a half-elf, we can sell him for a high price. The group of men laughed as they looked at William and the people who were trembling behind him. Amidst the crying of infants, William's blurred vision wandered at a tree in the distance. There he saw a man wearing a hood as his robes fluttered in the wind. The hooded man walked towards the group of men with even steps, and yet, no footsteps could be heard. When someone finally noticed him, he was already only a meter away from the man who broke William's arms and legs. And on that day, William finally saw with his own eyes, and finally understood, that the world outside the boundaries of Lant was a place filled with misery and strife, where the strong bullied the weak and the evil tyrants ended the lives of innocent people as if they were merely cutting grass. Before William's consciousness descended into darkness, he heard the hooded man say something in his direction. Requiescat in pace. The blood from the group of men sprayed into the air like fountains, and fell on the young boy's body like rain. The only saving grace was that William had already fainted and was unaware of what was happening in his surroundings. The hooded man looked down on the pitiful boy lying on the ground, with his limbs bent in unnatural angles and tears dyed with blood staining his handsome face. Even though he was unconscious, his tears never stopped falling. Perhaps, William wept for the lives that were lost, or perhaps he wept for his own loss. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. When morning came, the young boy who had left Lant more than a month ago would never be the same again. Compared to William, Eve is such a handful, Anna said as she softly patted the sleeping baby's back while looking at the flowers in the garden. When do you think he'll be coming back, father? James looked at his sleeping granddaughter with a smile on his face. However, when Anna mentioned William's name, the smile stiffened and was replaced with a troubled expression. It has been 6 months since he left Lant, James replied. I'm sure that he's already on his way back home. Anna pouted. Father, just where did you order William to go? I don't want Eve to grow up without spending time with her big brother. The red-headed boy firmly insisted that he be called Big Brother by Eve instead of cousin. Anna agreed on his request with a laugh because she felt that William's reaction was quite funny. She was not aware that James had sent the poor boy to a mission that would cause him to become. Suddenly, James raised his head to look in the direction of the northern gate of Lant because he had received a hidden message from Ezio. He hurriedly took his leave from the garden and headed north. When he arrived at the gate, he saw 2 hooded people. One tall, one small, and both wearing hooded robes. James had recognized both of them right away. The Lord of Lant had a calm expression on his face as he waited for the 2 people to arrive in front of him. I have returned, my lord. Ezio placed his hand over his chest in greeting. Welcome back. James briefly nodded his head before turning at the young boy whose face he couldn't see. Welcome back, William. The boy only gave a brief nod in acknowledgement and did nothing else. William simply stood there as his robes swayed in the wind. James sighed internally as he looked at his beloved grandson. He could immediately tell that the boy was not in the mood for emotional reunions. Both of you must be tired from your journey, James said. Let's go back to the residence. I'll ask Helen to prepare something good for the 2 of you. I'm not going. James frowned as he gazed upon the hooded boy standing in front of him. I'm not going to the residence, William stated. I'm going to Master's house. William didn't wait for James' reply and walked past him. The old man wasn't angered by William's actions. No, he couldn't possibly get angry because deep inside he was feeling very guilty. James could only look at his grandson's retreating back as he walked towards the south of Lant where Celine's residence was located. Sighing for the second time, he motioned for Ezio to follow him back to the residence. He wanted to hear his detailed report on what his grandson had experienced during his half-year absence from Lant. Chapter 110, Why is human life so fragile? How many? James asked. 100, Ezio answered. Only 100. Yes. James closed his eyes as his fingers tapped the armchair. He was thinking on what to do next, for he knew that he couldn't allow William to stay in his current state. The longer he stayed in that condition, the harder it would be for him to break free from its hold. Thank you and sorry for troubling you, James said as he looked at his loyal subordinate. Can you tell me everything that happened in detail? Yes. Ezio nodded. The man took off his hood and began to narrate everything that happened since he left Lant with William. He told James the places they visited, the people they met, and the things that happened in between. The old man listened with a serious expression as if he was afraid that he would miss a single word of Ezio's story. While this was happening, William had already arrived at Celine's house, but instead of meeting with his master, he went to the goat pen. Once inside, he closed all of its windows, and barred the entrance. The young boy went to the corner where the hay was stacked in a neat row and laid on top of it. Soon, he closed his eyes to sleep. His body would twitch from time to time and words would sometimes escape his lips. He was reliving the nightmares that he had experienced over the last 6 months in his dream. This was not the first time this had happened, for he had experienced this countless times during their journey. A few hours later, he woke up from his slumber. His stomach was growling and it was now time to eat. The boy was just about to take out the fruits he picked on their way back to lunch from his storage ring when the door of the goat pen swung open. Light flooded the dark environment and the boy had to cover his eyes due to the sudden brightness. "Stupid disciple, why didn't you come and greet me first?" A sweet and silky voice reached his ears. William looked at the beautiful woman who was walking towards him. If this was in the past, he might have already backed away in fear, but the current him only looked at Celine with an apathetic gaze. "Disciple greets master," William said with a brief nod. "I have returned." "That's it." Celine placed her hands on her waist. "No souvenirs? Or gifts?" "There was no opportunity to find any gifts suitable for the master," William answered. "Disciple will do better next time." Celine clicked her tongue in irritation. She wasn't liking the current William and it was pissing her off. "Go to the house and cook me an early dinner," Celine ordered. "Make sure to put your heart into it." "Okay." William nodded as he stood up from the haystack. He didn't question why his master wanted dinner at 3 in the afternoon, nor did he have any intention of asking. The boy simply followed Celine back to the house and headed straight towards the kitchen. Fiend.ovals on n/v/elbin.co/m. Oliver, who was seated on his perch, observed the young boy as he prepared the food for Celine. William had left Lant for a little over 6 months and, when he had returned, he had become like this. The parrot monkey had figured that this was bound to happen. However, seeing the mischievous William turn into an emotionless brat still ruffled his feathers. An hour later, Celine sat at the dining table facing William. The corner of her lips were twitching as she tried to maintain a smile on her beautiful face. "William, what are these?" Celine asked. "Master, this is a vegetable and fruit salad," William answered. "You know I like to eat meat, right?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you prepare any meat dishes?" Celine inquired. "Although salad is good, this only serves as a side dish for the main dish. I don't like the smell of meat," William replied as he casually filled his plate with salad. He was taking the eat if you want and don't eat if you don't want stance, which made Celine frown. The old William would never disobey nor argue with her when it came to her requests, especially food. The red-headed boy would even do his best to impress Celine with his cooking in order to be praised by her. However, this boy in front of her didn't care whether she wanted to eat or not, which was giving her a headache. The beautiful elf grudgingly ate the dishes that William had prepared for her. Although they tasted good, she was someone who liked to eat meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She was cursing James internally for doing this to her disciple. Celine was regretting the fact that she had agreed to the old man's suggestion to have William accompany Ezio on some of his missions. "Perhaps we rushed things too much." Celine sighed as she looked at the boy who had already finished eating. "William, come to my room tonight," Celine said as she placed down the fork in her hand. "Make sure to bathe properly, do you understand?" "Yes," William replied. "Master, if you don't need me for anything I will be returning to the goat pen. Go. But, remember that you have an appointment with me tonight." After giving Celine a brief nod, William left the house and returned to the goat pen. Celine and Oliver glanced at each other and shook their heads at the same time. "So, this is what it means to not cry over spilt milk." Oliver rolled his eyes. "Such an apt saying, don't you think, mistress?" Oliver. "Yes. Cook me some meat dishes." "As you wish, mistress." 3 hours after sunset, William knocked on Celine's bedroom door. He was wearing a plain robe used for sleeping and his body had a subtle fragrance of soap. "Come in." "Yes." William stepped inside his master's room. Celine gave the boy a brief glance before beckoning him to come to the bed. William obeyed and laid beside his master. He then closed his eyes to sleep. For some reason, the beautiful elf felt a slight disappointment in her heart because the boy didn't even bat an eye while looking at her in her nightdress. Just a few months ago, William's face would turn beet red whenever he saw Celine in her nightwear. Now, he was acting as if he was an adult and Celine was just a little girl who had no redeeming features whatsoever. Celine pushed aside these mundane thoughts to the back of her mind as she pressed her forehead over William's. Synchronization. Celine almost didn't recognize William's sea of consciousness because it was very different from the one she saw 6 months ago. Last time, William's sea of consciousness was filled with stars that glittered brightly in the sky. The ocean underneath their feet would reflect these stars and create a world filled with dazzling colors. Now, there was only one color in William's world and that was red. Red clouds hung in the sky, and the ocean under her feet had a deep crimson color. Countless weapons were embedded in the ocean's surface, with their handles pointed towards the heavens in defiance. Swords, spears, axes, daggers, and several weapons both exotic and unique could be seen everywhere. In the center of it all stood a small figure wearing a hood. Blood droplets fell from his blood-stained hands which made small ripples beside his feet. Celine frowned when she saw this scene, but her feet didn't stop moving. She walked up to the boy who was staring in the distance, with his hood covering his face. "Master, why is human life so fragile?" William asked without turning his head. Why do the innocent always have to be the ones to suffer? If showing goodwill to other people is repaid with a stab in the back, then what is the point of kindness? William finally turned his head to look at the beautiful woman who had tortured him countless times in the past. I think it would be best if everyone just stopped being nice to each other, William said softly. That way, you wouldn't feel betrayed if someone were to put a collar on your neck and sell you as a slave. Celine took a step forward, then gently held the back of William's head. She then pulled him close to her chest, giving him a tight hug. William felt his master's warmth and softness, as well as the familiar fragrance that was coming from her body. However, it didn't have the same meaning as it did in the past. Nothing mattered to him anymore. He even missed Celine's torturous lessons. At least, during those times, he could scream and cry out because of the pain. Now, all the tears in his eyes had dried out. He no longer had tears to shed, he no longer cared. For him, the life he had now had lost its meaning. Chapter 111, Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Within that blood-stained world, William laid on Celine's lap. He was sleeping very deeply. His body, heart, and soul were very tired. The young boy hadn't slept much during those 6 months that he had been away from Lant, and it had taken its toll on his body. Celine had a feeling that William had just wanted to return to Lant before he closed himself off from the world. Right now, she had a vague feeling that the boy had no intention of ever waking up from his slumber. It was as if he had gone into a self-inflicted coma without knowing when he would open his eyes again. Did we make a mistake? Celine muttered as she gently caressed the side of William's face. Did we push you too much? Did it hurt you that deeply? She wanted to know the answers to her questions, but no answer came. William's sleeping face, that used to look peaceful and attractive, was now pale and rigid. She could even see the slight frown that creased the corners of his face, and it made her wonder if the boy was still in pain even in his comatose state. James sighed for the umpteenth time as he stood on the hill overlooking Lant. His gaze was turned to the south where Celine's house was located. He had already received a message from Celine about William's current condition, and it filled him with endless worry. A week had already passed since William had entered a catatonic state, and only Owen's nutritional potions were maintaining the functions of his body. The old man racked his brains to find an answer to his problem, but all of the solutions he thought up came to a dead end. He didn't dare to try and forcefully wake his grandson from his current state, because it might cause his consciousness to be wiped out completely. I should have waited until he was older. James blamed himself for his stupidity. Everything was going smoothly and I ruined it all. While James was in the midst of his self-blame, the sound of a bell reached his ears. The old man raised his head to look behind him and saw Ella walking in his direction. For a brief moment, James thought that he saw a look of disapproval on the goat's face. When the goat was only a meter away from him, she turned her back and kicked him. James was completely caught by surprise and didn't have time to defend himself. He never thought that the goat that he had raised since she was a young kid would attempt to kick him when he was feeling down and depressed. Ella snorted at the stupid old man who was sprawled on the ground before walking towards the south. She had just arrived a few hours ago and learned the cause of William's current condition from Oliver. Knowing the perpetrator for her baby's suffering, Ella was very keen to give him a good beating. However, after giving the old man a full-powered kick, she didn't have the heart to do any follow-up attacks. After all, she could tell with a glance that James was also suffering. After arriving at Celine's house, Ella conversed with Oliver and asked him to help move the sleeping William to the goat pen. Although Celine was reluctant to move her disciple from her bed, she still agreed to Ella's condition. She had already done everything in her power to help the boy wake up, but it all ended in failure. The beautiful elf thought that, perhaps, Ella would be able to pull William out from his deep sleep because the two of them had been together for a very long time. With her help, William laid comfortably in a pile of hay inside the goat pen. I'll leave him in your care, Ella, Celine said after making sure that the boy was sleeping comfortably. Me. Ella nodded in response. Celine gave her one and only disciple one last glance before leaving the goat shed along with Oliver. Although they didn't show it on their faces, they hoped that Ella would be able to create a miracle. Ella laid beside William and looked at his sleeping face with gentle eyes. 5 minutes later, she pressed her forehead against William's and closed her eyes. A young lady with long, light blue hair that reached down to her waist walked towards the center of the blood-stained world. From all angles, her proportions were perfect and even more curvaceous than Celine. She wore a sleeveless fairy-like dress that fluttered gently as if a soft breeze was moving past her body. The weapons that were present in the background made her look like a valkyrie that had come to pick up the soul of a brave warrior to bring to Valhalla. Her light purple eyes, that were as bright as William's when he was still a baby, stared in the distance where a floating figure could be seen. The silver bell on her neck rang softly, as if to announce her arrival. The two purple horns on her head glowed faintly as she neared the sleeping boy whom she had raised since he arrived in Lant. The young lady, who seemed to be around 19 years old, made a gesture with her hand, and faint ripples started to appear under her feet. If William could see the lady who had intruded inside his world, there was a high chance that he would go in a daze even in his apathetic state due to her incredible beauty. As if pulled by an invisible string, William's body slowly floated towards the lady with light blue hair. When he arrived in front of her, the first thing the lady did was to take off the hood that covered his head. Ella gazed down at William with a gentle expression. She felt sad that the young boy had ended up this way and regretted the fact that she hadn't given James another kick earlier. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, Ella said softly as she held William in a loving embrace. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. A celestial throne appeared in the air above her that glittered like the stars in the sky. Ella floated in the air, carrying William, and sat on the throne like an empress. With a gentle tug, she unclasped the lock of her fairy-like dress that was located on the back of her neck. Her beautiful upper body was laid bare for the world to see, but in this world, only one person existed and he was currently unconscious. Ella gently raised William's head as she caressed the side of his face. You still haven't lived your life to the fullest, so why are you so eager to cross to the other side? Do you think that I will allow you to go? If you want to give a message to the world, let it be simple. As simple as the life of a shepherd. William's lips parted as they had done countless times in the past. The beautiful lady didn't need to do anything and simply watched with a loving gaze as her baby moved by instinct to receive what was rightfully his. Daily quest, drink milk has been completed. Rewards, 5,000 EXP points. Bonus rewards, 10 God points. Soul healing currently in effect. Visit novelbin.cm for updates. Host's consciousness will slowly recover over time. A series of notifications flashed across William's status page, but the boy was unable to see them because he was still unconscious. However, these messages only flashed briefly before disappearing from the message logs completely. The system made an arbitrary decision to delete all records of Ella's actions. Even though the messages were deleted, the rewards and healing effects remained. Currently, the system was in the process of brainstorming a made-up story to explain where the additional experience points and God points came from. Ella, who had remembered the memories of the Goddess Amalthea, was able to use her power for a short period of time. However, there was only one downside. She wouldn't remember anything that happened while she was in her celestial form. Even so, she didn't care. The only thing that mattered to her right now was to pull William out of the darkness and slowly bring him back to his lively self, whom she loved with all her heart. Chapter 112, Final Heaven Part 1. What am I doing here? William thought as he gazed at the familiar ceiling of the goat pen. His memory was a bit hazy and he couldn't remember much of what happened after he had talked with Celine inside his sea of consciousness. The only thing he remembered was closing his eyes to sleep. Just as he was trying to understand how he ended up in the goat pen, a fluffy Angarian goat arrived at the entrance carrying a basket in her mouth. Ella walked towards William and dropped the basket by his side. She was very happy that the young boy was finally awake. William blinked once, as he looked at the Angarian goat that he hadn't seen for more than half a year. His hand slowly reached out to her, but stopped midway. His instinct prevented him from completing the motion because he felt that if he touched her, he would be staining something pure with his blood-soaked hands. As if sensing his thoughts, Ella pressed the side of her face against one of William's hands while bleating softly. Me. Ella moved closer and rested her head on William's shoulder. She didn't say anything else and simply wanted to be close to William. The red-headed boy, on the other hand, pressed his cheek against Ella's face as he lowered his hands to the ground. He wanted to hug his second mother, like he always did, but he was afraid that he would make a mistake and accidentally. William lifted his head. Ella reluctantly stepped back and bleated. Me. Thank you, Mama. Me. William opened the basket and saw some pancakes and a small bottle of honey. The moment he saw the food, his stomach started to grumble, but he didn't eat right away. He left the goat pen to draw some water from the well in order to wash his hands. The boy had always been strict with himself when it came to cleanliness. He would always wash his hands before he ate, and even his pang of hunger wouldn't stop him from performing basic hygiene. When he was done washing his hands, he returned to the goat pen and began to eat. Ella sat on the hay beside him, and simply watched her baby eat the first breakfast he'd had after a week of sleeping. William had just finished eating his food when Celine entered the goat pen. It's good to see that you are finally awake, Celine said. How are you feeling? I'm fine, Master, William replied. Do you need me for something? Celine shook her head and appraised the young boy that was sitting on the hay. He still had that standoffish mood, but it was much better compared to how it was when he arrived in Lant a week ago. Since you just woke up, it would be best for you to take it easy for the time being, Celine stated. Do you have any plans for today? I don't, William answered. Why don't you go back home for a while? I'm sure that your uncle, aunt, and grandfather are worried about you. Can't I stay here for a few more days? William didn't really want to return to the Ainsworth residence at this time. Although he didn't hate his grandfather, he didn't want to be around other people right now. He didn't want to hear laughter. He didn't want to hear kind words. He didn't want to feel the warmth of humans. Seeing his determined stance, Celine had no choice but to give him some space. Fight edu upts on NOV/E/LN.com. Okay, you can stay here for as long as you want, but you must eat on time, Celine reminded him. Understand? Yes. William nodded. Should I cook for you later, Master? No, Celine shook her head. Sick people should just rest and recover. William understood the hidden meaning behind his master's words. Celine was indirectly telling him to keep his salad to himself. Honestly, the boy was also not in the mood to cook anything. The reason why he offered to cook was just to show respect to Celine since she was his master. After the beautiful elf left William alone, the young boy laid down once more on the stack of hay. Like he said earlier, he had no intention of going anywhere. What he wanted was to be left alone. He placed his hands on the back of his head as he stared at the ceiling. For some reason, ever since he woke up, he felt more calm and at peace. This was the first time that he had felt like this since he left Lant to accompany Ezio on his mission. Suddenly, he felt a slight pressure on his stomach. Ella had laid beside William and used the boy's tummy as her pillow. The boy's hand moved unconsciously to brush her head, but it stopped halfway before dropping to his side. Sorry, Mama, William thought. I'm afraid that I might accidentally hurt you if I touch you. In order to clear his thoughts, he started the breathing exercises that Ezio had told him to calm his senses. William inhaled slowly through his nose, and exhaled just as slowly using his mouth. 10 minutes later, he finally regained his calm and closed his eyes to dive into his sea of consciousness. When William opened his eyes, he was surprised to see that at the center of his world, there was a patch of blue sky. Aside from that, he also sensed that the thick scent of blood in the air had also lessened. As he was wondering what was going on, he sensed someone entering his mindscape. William immediately summoned Stormacaller and took a fighting stance. Lightning crackled on its purple blade as the image of the intruder slowly materialized in front of him. I didn't come here to fight, but I guess this is good as well, an almost musical voice said as it stopped a few meters away from William. I'm curious to know how far you have come in your training. If the two of us are going to fight together, I will need to know your current fighting ability. William could hear himself drawing a deep breath as his gaze locked on the beautiful lady in front of him. He had thought that his master was already very beautiful, but the intruder who had entered his world made his heart tremble. It took all of his willpower to break out from his daze and force himself to ask her a question. Who are you? William asked as he pointed his spear towards the lady with light blue hair who was making his heart beat wildly inside his chest. How did you manage to enter my sea of consciousness? Although he didn't sense any malicious intent coming from her, the young boy had developed a mild sense of paranoia after everything that he had experienced on his journey outside of Lant. I will tell you the answer after you beat me. The beautiful lady smiled as she summoned a bow made up of crystals. Come, fight me with everything you have. With her declaration, she fired a magical arrow aimed at William's chest. The boy used his movement technique, Heavenly Phantasm, to dodge and, at the same time, charge in her direction. Ella smiled because this was the first time that she was fighting against William. She couldn't possibly do this in the real world because she was afraid that he would receive a serious injury. However, since they were inside his sea of consciousness, she could fight to her heart's content. After all, she wanted William's killing intent to diminish, and for that to happen, he needed to fight against someone without holding back. Seeing that the red-headed boy managed to cross the distance in an instant, Ella unsummoned her bow and clenched her fists. Taste the fury of the celestial heavens, Ella said with an enchanting smile on her face. Final Heaven. Chapter 113, Final Heaven Part 2. William made a full thrust with his spear as Stormcaller's full power burst forth from its enchanted blade. Just like a lightning bolt, the young boy drove his spear forward without mercy. However, what happened next blew his breath away. The beautiful lady didn't move and calmly received his strike. For a brief moment, William had the urge to pull back his attack because the person in front of him felt strangely familiar. However, this feeling disappeared just as quickly as it arrived. William put all of his attention on the opponent in front of him and put more force behind his attack. When the tip of the spear was merely a meter away from Ella's face, her fist moved and casually deflected the blow upwards. The boy calmly executed a downward slash to regain his momentum, but Ella was a step faster than him. The two exchanged blows a couple of times within the sea of consciousness. No matter what William did, he couldn't get the upper hand. No, it was more like his opponent was matching his current level of strength. Stormacaller, annihilate my enemy. William threw Stormacaller towards the blue-haired girl and let it attack autonomously. He then summoned his bow and quiver and unleashed a barrage of arrows that left no paths of escape. Very good, Ella said with approval. But, not enough. She grabbed Stormacaller after it tried to attack her and used it to deflect the arrows that William had fired. She then charged forward and wielded the spear who was struggling hard to escape her grasp. The spear emitted powerful lightning currents in order to injure the person who tried to forcefully wield it, but it was to no avail. The lightning flowed harmlessly through Ella's body as if it was just a passing breeze. William narrowed his eyes because he finally understood that his opponent was only taking it easy on him. Lightning God War Art, 8 form, William muttered as he aimed his bow at the approaching figure in front of him. Exterminate, Chryselakatos. The arrow that was knocked on the bow glowed with an eerie green light. When William released the string, a subtle hiss that was similar to that of a viper's reverberated in the battlefield. Ella was about to deflect William's attack, but immediately changed her plan because she felt something ominous from the arrow that William had shot towards her. She stopped her charge just in time to see the arrow multiply into hundreds of copies. The Lightning God War Art, Chryselakatos, was a special move that William could use when he was wielding a bow. Its ability was to imbue an arrow with a very potent poison that was especially deadly against women. To make things worse, the arrow shot by this skill would multiply in the hundreds. Each arrow had the same attributes as the original, which made this skill the perfect attack for a group of enemies. Even if the arrows just grazed them, the poison would immediately render them unable to continue fighting. You've learned quite a nasty trick, Ella said calmly as she threw the struggling spear in her hands. She then smiled and extended her slender hand above her head. Cryo Fortress. Massive walls of ice surrounded her in all sides, and a giant fortress appeared inside William's sea of consciousness. All the arrows that William had shot embedded themselves within the fortress walls, while Ella stood at above it, smiling at William. "Playtime's over," Ella announced. With just a single step forward, she appeared right in front of William before casually delivering a simple punch. Before the boy could even react to the unbelievable move by his opponent, Ella's blow had already reached him. Ella's fist embedded itself on William's chest and sent him flying 100 meters away from where she stood. William's face contorted in pain when he received the unbelievable attack from the blue-haired beauty. Everything happened so fast that he didn't even have the time to understand how she was able to land a blow on him in that short period of time. "It's dangerous to let your mind wander during a fight," a voice whispered in his ear. "Make sure to stay focused on your opponent at all times." Before William could even say or do anything, he found himself slamming into the ground face first. If he thought that his current situation couldn't get worse, he was greatly mistaken. The moment his face slammed on the ground, a foot stepped on his back and delivered another powerful blow that made the ocean ripple under William's body. Unlike his master, Celine, the beautiful lady with light blue hair and purple eyes, didn't give William time to recover and made him experience a world of pain. With each punch, William felt the core of his soul shudder. With each kick, the boy's thoughts scattered. Ella delivered blow after blow after blow and didn't stop hitting William until the boy had loosened his hold on his weapon. Stormacaller fell on the ocean and the light from its blade disappeared completely. William was about to hit the ground as well, but a pair of slender arms caught him and held him in a protective embrace. "You've gotten a bit stronger," Ella whispered in the unconscious boy's ears. "Well done." Ella floated into the air. A second later, a celestial throne appeared and she sat there while cradling the unconscious boy in her arms. She unclasped the lock on the back of her neck that supported her upper clothes. It will not be easy to return William to his former self, and Ella understood that a consistent and gradual recovery was the most optimal choice. Because of that, she was willing to give her baby her full support, and nourish both of his body and soul in order to aid in the healing process. Soul healing currently in effect. Host's consciousness will slowly recover over time. When William woke up he found himself inside the familiar goat pen. The interior of the pen was bathed in an orange light, for the sun was just about to set. The young boy fell into a daze as an elusive memory briefly passed through his mind before disappearing completely. "I think I'm forgetting something very important," William frowned as he propped himself to a sitting position. He closed his eyes and thought for a long time, but he couldn't grasp the fleeting memory that momentarily appeared after waking up. When the feeling finally subsided, the boy scratched his head in confusion. "If I forget it then it's not important." Just as he was about to stand up to go to Celine's house, a shadow appeared at the entrance of the goat pen. Ella walked towards William carrying a basket in her mouth. She placed it beside the boy and bleated. "Thank you, Mama," William said. "Me." William hadn't noticed it, but Ella did. When the boy said thank you to her, the corner of his lips lifted a little. It was as if his body was remembering how to smile, but it was still rusty, and needed more maintenance for it to work properly. Ella's eyes softened because she knew that the old William was starting to rise up to the surface once again. During the next few days, Anna would visit William with her daughter, Eve, to check on his condition. She would even place Eve beside William in order for her daughter to get to know her older cousin better. William was afraid to touch the baby, but he was also afraid that rejecting Anna's advances would break her aunt's heart. That's why he did what he could do to the best of his abilities and sat straight without moving an inch. He allowed his little cousin to crawl all over him, stick her fingers up his nose, pull his hair a bit, and sometimes, Eve would even sleep on his lap. Whenever he had reached his limit, he would give his aunt a pleading gaze and Anna would take that as a sign that their family bonding time was up. Anna would then take Eve away and thank William for playing with her daughter. With the help of Ella's nourishment, William was starting to open his heart again. This was also why the red-headed boy did his best to endure the presence of his adorable cousin who seemed to be hell-bent on getting a reaction from him. Days passed. Weeks passed. Months passed. Finally, in the 4th month, the young boy stepped out of the goat pen and walked towards the hill overlooking Lant. He breathed in the fresh morning air and stared at the darkness. The sky was slowly brightening in the east, but the sun had still not risen. His left arm was hugging Ella's body, who was sharing her warmth with him, as both of them waited for the sunrise. When the sun finally poked its head above the horizon, the first rays of light illuminated the world. William's light green eyes, that had regained their clarity, shone like emeralds as he took in the sights and sounds of the beautiful world where he was born. "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that," William muttered. "Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." For some reason, these words would come to his mind from time to time. He had a nagging feeling that someone had told him these words before, someone very close to him. However, no matter how much he tried to seek the owner of these words, only an elusive figure with light blue hair appeared inside his head. "Me. Yes, Mama. It's a beautiful sunrise. Me." William softly caressed the side of Ella's body as he looked at the town of Lant. A small town in the countryside, where everyone was living a peaceful life and away from the horrors of the world. A small piece of paradise in a land ravaged by strife. "Master, do you like it?" William asked. "I made sure to use all my skills in cooking it. It's not bad, but can you please add some meat next time?" Celine replied. "Although I am an elf, I am not a vegetarian." "Master, vegetables are good for your body," William countered Celine's argument. "It keeps the skin smooth and makes you look young and healthy." After the meal, William left to return to the Ainsworth residence. When the boy was no longer in their sights, the beautiful elf smiled as she gave Oliver a sidelong glance. The parrot monkey rolled his eyes to the side before flying to the kitchen in order to prepare some meat dishes for Celine. Discover EU chapters at novelb.co. Both of them didn't want William to go into a relapse, so they didn't dare to cook any meat when he was around. Although it was a hassle, the two endured for the sake of their disciple. Chapter 114, The choice is up to you to make. Feeling bolstered by the sunrise, William soon found himself facing off against a powerful foe that was twice as strong as a terror hand. Why don't you hold her? Anna asked. A pair of clear blue eyes looked up at him, and William could feel his heart beating wildly inside his chest. "Aya," Eve said as she gazed at her big brother with renewed excitement. "Hello, Eve," William replied with a stiff smile on his face. The 2-year-old girl had crawled up to William the moment he'd returned to the Ainsworth residence, which created this awkward scene. William lightly coughed because he didn't know how to respond to his Aunt Anna's request. If it was the William of a year ago, he would definitely hug, squish, and kiss Eve to oblivion. However, right now, he was afraid to hold the delicate baby for fear that he would not be able to control his strength and accidentally hurt her. Seeing this scene, James came to the rescue and picked his cute granddaughter up from the floor. William is still unable to control his strength due to his training, James explained. He's just worried that he might harm his cousin, so he is not in a hurry to hold her. Anna frowned as she gazed at her nephew. "Is that why you're not playing with her?" "Yes." William nodded. "Sorry, Aunt. I really want to play with Eve, but I don't want to hurt her." Eve giggled and grabbed a fistful of William's hair. It was as if the little girl was challenging her big brother to hurt her. The young boy could only smile helplessly as the little baby tugged on his hair while laughing. While this was happening, James whispered to Helen and asked her to cook something nice to celebrate William's return. However, he also added to make the dishes void of any meat. The headmaid nodded her head in agreement and headed towards the kitchen. James looked at his grandson who was getting bullied by his granddaughter with a smile. After having her fill of playing with her older cousin, Eve felt sleepy, so Anna decided to return her to their bedroom to sleep. "Come with me, William," James said as he walked towards the conference room without even waiting for the young boy's reply. William followed behind his grandpa with a calm expression. Ella decided to stay in the living room to give the two some privacy. Although she was curious about what James was planning to tell William, she knew that it would be better if she gave both of them some space. Inside the conference room, "Do you hate me?" James asked. "No," William answered. "In fact, I am very thankful. Thank you, Grandpa, for letting me see the dark side of the world." William bowed respectfully to his grandfather. During his 4 months of recovery, he had time to think about many things. Among those things was why James decided to let him accompany Ezio on his missions. What William experienced was a culture shock. Although he had heard and imagined that such things were happening in the southern continent, seeing them personally made him question the knowledge he had about the world he was currently living in. Your Fvorit stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. It was a painful lesson that brought William to despair. Fortunately, there were people who cared about him and pulled him out from the darkness that he had trapped himself in. James didn't say anything and just looked at his grandson. He was already old and understood that some words need not be spoken between men. "I'm very happy that you had shaken off the fetters that bound you, but the current you is no good," James said with a serious expression. "You can't live your life being unable to trust and touch people again, so a new round of training must be done in order to fix this issue. This time, I will give you 2 options." William stayed silent as he listened to his grandfather. He also knew that his current state was not ideal because it prevented him from being able to interact with people. If possible, he wanted to hug his cute cousin and play with her as well. "The first option is that you need to train with Jekyll," James said. "He will teach you about etiquette and how to act like a proper gentleman. The second option is to learn from Fayrite. He will teach you how to become a bard, and help you release your negative emotions as well as residual killing intent. The choice is up to you to make." "I'll choose the second option," William answered in a heartbeat. "Being a gentleman is not my style. My character will become inconsistent if I force myself to act that way. I'm fine with being a narcissist." There was another reason why William chose Fayrite instead of Jekyll. Due to his heightened perception, he had grasped the ability to tell who among the people he had met were the most dangerous. The soul dentist, who always had a smile on his face, was on the very top of his list. Even Ezio's killing intent was not able to make William cower. But, when facing Jekyll, the boy always felt as if he was a pig that was about to be slaughtered. "Fayrite? This is not a bad idea." James nodded. "You can also use this skill to court the beautiful ladies that you see on your journey." William just smiled at his grandpa's never-ending attempt to make him bring home potential bride candidates. "Very well, I will arrange for him to teach you by afternoon tomorrow. He's always asleep till noon because he performs at the tavern during the evenings." "Thank you, Grandpa." "You're welcome." After eating lunch, William returned to his room that he hadn't visited for a long time. Everything was in order and the young boy could tell that his Aunt Helen had cleaned his room in regular intervals. On his desk, several books with information about the Silver Moon continent could be seen piled up on top of each other. However, the one pile that caught William's attention was the neatly stacked letters on the right side of his desk. The young boy's eyes widened in surprise as he immediately took the letters in his hand. Just as he expected, all of the letters belonged to his mother Arwen. William felt a slight ache in his heart at the thought of not being able to reply to her letters. It made him feel bad that several years had passed and their exchanges came to a halt. Sorry, Mother, William muttered as he opened the first letter according to the date that they arrived. He planned to read all of them and write a reply letter as soon as possible. As he read the letters one by one, Ella laid beside him with her eyes closed. She was planning to take a nap to recover her strength. The months that she had spent beside William had also taken a toll on her soul as she used the power of the Bell of Anthanasia. Since William was already feeling better, she decided to catch up on her much-needed rest and read Arwen's letter at a later time. A few hours passed before the boy finished reading all the letters that Arwen had sent to him. Complicated emotions rose from his chest as he went to his desk to write a reply to his mother. It seems that James had written a few letters to Arwen and explained that William was currently in training. Even so, that didn't stop Arwen from sending a letter once every month. She hoped that one of her letters would arrive during her son's in-between breaks so he would be able to reply to her. Unfortunately, Skyla always arrived at a bad time and wasn't able to meet William. The Crane also didn't want to disturb the boy's training, so she simply asked James to give Arwen a monthly report on William's training. As William focused on writing his letter, he didn't notice that the sun had already set. If not for the knock on his door that broke his concentration, he would still be writing his letter. Young master, it's time for dinner, Helen said with a smile. Thank you, Aunt Helen, William replied. I'll be in the dining room in a minute. After dinner, William was about to return to his room when he heard the familiar cry of a crane come from outside the house. The boy immediately ran out of the door and was just in time to see Skyla land down a few meters from the main door of the house. The silver moon crane gave William the finally you're here gaze, as it uttered a soft cry in greeting. Big sister. William ran towards the 2-meter-tall crane and was about to hug her, but stopped midway. He had still not fully recovered from his mental shackles that prevented him from being intimate with anyone aside from Ella. Just an hour ago, he was thinking of a way to send his letter to the Silver Moon continent. He didn't want Arwen to wait for a second longer and was about to ask his grandfather for an alternative way to deliver the letter. Fortunately, an express carrier had arrived to answer his prayers. William respectfully invited Skyla to the garden and brought her food. He then waited patiently for her to finish eating before he started to ask questions about his mother and what she had been doing over the past few years. Although the crane was exhausted from her journey, she still talked to William and shared quite a bit of gossip about the Silver Moon continent. The crane also noticed something different about William. As a very intelligent beast, it was quite easy for her to spot these changes. However, she didn't pry because she also understood that this was part of William's growth. The two talked until midnight before the crane left the boy to hunt for more food. Skyla planned to rest for an entire day before her return trip to the holy city of Nitfaethel. Deep inside she was very happy after finally seeing William. After a very long time, she would finally be able to deliver William's handwritten letter to Arwen who had been missing him terribly for years. Chapter 115, Breaking Free from the Shackles. The next day, Ella, Anna, Eve, and Skyla sat in the garden while listening to the songs that William was singing. He was in the middle of recording songs using a high-grade recording crystal that had been given to him by James at his request. Since he was always stuck inside a hospital room back on Earth, William had decided to have a few hobbies like playing the guitar to pass time. He was quite good at it, so when he had obtained the Bard job class, he decided to record a few songs for Arwen. This way, his mother would always hear his voice and not miss him too much. Due to the power of the job class, William's playing skills were enhanced to another level. Not only that, his voice was smoother and more captivating. The songs he recorded were Disney songs that he had loved since he was a child. Songs like, Do You Feel the Love Tonight, Fly the Distance, My Whole You World, and Beauty and the Bestie. Anna was quite curious about how William learned these songs because she had never heard them before. The young boy only said that he had heard the songs during his travels outside of Lant. The songs were like a lullaby for Eve and the little girl slept peacefully while William was doing his one-man concert. That night, Skyla spread her wings and embarked on her journey towards the Silver Moon continent. She was quite in a hurry to return back home and let Arwen listen to her son's performance. The crane knew that her partner would cry tears of joy the moment she heard William's songs, and it made her determination to return as soon as possible burn brighter. The next day, Fairite sat beside William as he taught him the proper way to perform in front of people. When you sing a song, you should smile, Fairite said while holding his lute. You might not believe it, but when you are smiling, your heart smiles as well. This will empower our songs because us bards must always sing from our heart. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the power of our songs. With a song, we can raise the morale of an army, or make them weep bitter tears. We can make the hearts of ladies swoon, or make the children dance to our tune. This is the power of music, and I dare say that it is one of the most wonderful gifts that the gods have given us mortal creatures. William nodded in agreement. Music had been one of his constant companions during the hard times of his life. Well, since both of us are already handsome, we don't need to fix our faces, Fairite smiled. However, we need to always look presentable, especially when performing in front of people. Those shabby shepherd clothes of yours just won't do. Fairite shook his head because although William looked good, his fashion sense was a disaster. As a fashionista, he couldn't accept the young man's taste in clothing. Listen, although I understand that you are a shepherd, while we are together I expect you to dress up as a performer, Fairite ordered. Discover new chapters at novelb.co. I don't want my colleagues to spread gossip that my student is a crude boy who doesn't even have an ounce of professionalism in his bones. The moment I hear that you performed wearing shepherd's clothes, I swear I will whack you until you forget your name. Do I make myself clear? William nodded his head once more. Although he didn't think that playing a song while wearing shepherd's clothes was a big deal, he didn't want to offend his current instructor. The young boy was currently holding a lute similar to the one in Fayrite's hands. The only difference was that William's was more beautiful. James had rummaged through his treasures and found several musical instruments like the harp, flute, mandolin, lyre, and several others that he had taken from the bandit camps that he had raided. After pondering for a while, William decided to just take them all. Since he was a bard, he could play all the instruments with the help of his job class. Since that was the case, taking these treasures from his grandpa was the most ideal choice. Fayrite and William did their lessons in the garden, because the elf wanted to be surrounded by beautiful things when he performed. William didn't expect Fayrite to be very skilled in his craft. The boy thought that his songs were already good enough, but when he heard the elf sing, he felt his soul being forcefully taken to places that he had never been before. To glorious battlefields, to beautiful valleys, hidden abodes, and to peeping in on romantic trysts. Fayrite did it all, and he did it so naturally that William felt envious of his musical talent. You can praise me, you know. Fayrite gave him a teasing smile. I will not charge extra for overtime. You're amazing, Maestro, William praised from the heart. I wish I could perform like you. Don't worry, when I'm done with you, you will be able to perform in front of kings and emperors. Fayrite flipped his hair like the narcissist he was. Sometimes, all you need to do is let your heart do the talking when you play. Remember this, my dear student, music is the universal language of mankind. Spirits don't usually talk to anyone, but when you play them a tune, they will start to dance. With Fayrite's personal teachings, William was able to let go of all the pent-up emotions inside his heart. Every time he sang a song, he could feel himself letting go of all of his worries, and it made him feel at peace. Ella, Anna, Eve, and Helen were his avid fans. They would always find time to listen to him singing in the garden, and William liked their company. Although singing by himself was good every now and then, singing for others made him happier. Sometimes, Eve would crawl towards William and tug on his clothes. Other times, she would grab his lute and touch the strings. These precious incidents helped William gain better control of his emotions, which greatly helped in his recovery. Almost half a year had passed since William started his bard training with Fayrite. The exchange of letters between him and Arwen continued without fail. With each letter he opened, he felt closer to his mother, who was hundreds of miles away from him. The two had grown very close through these exchanges, and the young boy's love for his mother grew with each passing day. William gave Skyla a big hug, and the latter nuzzled him before soaring to the sky. In his last letter, the young boy sent his mother a recording crystal with the songs he sang. Arwen loved William's gift and played them every day. Big sister, have a safe trip and tell my mother I love her. William shouted as he waved at the crane in the sky. Skyla replied with a cry of affirmation and circled William once before flying in the direction of the Silver Moon continent. With the maestro's help, the red-headed boy was able to break free from the shackles that prevented him from being intimate with other people. Sometimes, the half-elf wondered if things would have ended differently if he had chosen Jekyll instead of Fayrite. He had a feeling that he might have lost something very important to him if he had chosen the dentist as his instructor instead of the lively bard who taught him the power of music. Twinkle twinkle, little star, how I wonder where you are. William sang while Eve sat on his lap. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Eve was making random baby sounds as she tried to sing along with William. The two of them had gotten close after her big brother had started to open up his heart to people again. Deep inside, William was very happy because he loved spending his time with children. He was now in full control of his emotions, and held Eve in a protective embrace. The two of you have really become close, Anna said with a smile as she walked towards them. I'm starting to feel jealous. Mama. Eve clapped her hands as she called out to her mother. Anna scooped up her daughter and kissed her cheeks. Have you been a good girl? Eve kissed her cheeks in reply, and Anna nuzzled her beloved daughter. William watched this scene with a smile on his face as he stood up from the ground. Although he wanted to stay, there were still a few things he needed to do. He bid his aunt goodbye and headed towards the valley where the herds were grazing. Yesterday, he bought the weapon that the system had recommended to him from the god shop. This weapon contained a job class that William had wanted for a very long time. Thanks to the 90% discount coupon, the god points he had earned during his missions, and the bonus god points that he earned through overcoming his weakness, he was able to purchase this weapon from the shop. The system had thought long and hard for a proper excuse to give William for the extra god points he had received out of nowhere, and decided to just say that it was the bonus points that was awarded to him after being able to recover from his previous state. After acquiring the job class from the weapon, William understood that it worked the same as the other professions that he had mastered so far. Since that was the case, he wanted a master to teach him on how to utilize this new power to its fullest potential. He believed that if he mastered this job class, he would be able to work with Ella to overcome most adversities. Just a few more months and I'll be leaving Lant, William muttered as he looked in the direction of the capital of the Hellan Kingdom. I'll be seeing you again soon, EST. William knew that he couldn't stay inside this safe haven forever, for he had to meet his mother and father in the Silver Moon continent. However, this time, he was no longer afraid. He had regained his purpose and the light in his heart was now brighter than before. It would not lose so easily to the darkness that had taken hold of him not long ago. The young boy knew that right now, he couldn't change the world and make it a better place. He was not strong enough to do that. William understood that he had to venture outside of Lant in order to make his mark to the world. Although he would encounter hardships, challenges, and people stronger than him along his journey, he would still walk the path he had chosen. For he was not alone. He was not the same boy he was back on Earth, stuck inside a hospital room, waiting for the day when he would draw his last breath. There were people who loved him, cared for him, and supported him. He also had his herd that would stand with him when he faced the inevitable battles that he couldn't escape from. Naturally, he didn't plan on losing any of these battles. He would face them with everything he had. If he couldn't win, then he would just run away and call his grandpa. Calling reinforcements was not against the rules, and William was perfectly fine with sitting on the shoulder of giants. He would just get his revenge when he had leveled up and became stronger. William chuckled as he thought of these stupid thoughts. The image of him hiding behind James' back as the old man punched the living lights out of his enemies made him laugh out loud. Ella stood beside William and looked at the happy expression on his face. "Let's go, Mama." William grinned as he pointed at the sun in the distance. In this world of swords and magic, where adventure runs wild and free, our legend is about to begin. Me. Chapter 116, Forever Loving You. 4 years had passed since William lost his powers during the trial of courage. Many things happened in the Hellan Kingdom during this time. Just like James predicted, after the king had settled the aftermath of the beast tide, he sent those who had performed meritorious service to reclaim the lands that had lost their owners. Due to James' immediate action, Fushia and Zinar fell under the control of Lant. The nobles made a ruckus, but the king quieted them down with the merits that James had acquired during the battle at Windkeep Citadel. Of course, that was only the king's excuse. He knew that dealing with James was a pain, so he decided to just turn a blind eye to his actions. Also, the Orobro was not just for show. It was a one-man army that could easily match a flood dragon in a life-and-death battle. The nobles that had reclaimed the lands near the borders of Lant decided to send James plenty of gifts in order to show that they wished to coexist in peace. Cedric had also accepted the fact that there was no way he could rebuild Fushia with the remaining survivors. He would be lying if he said that he didn't feel sad about the current situation, but Leah convinced him that this was for the best. In order to forget his heartache, Cedric asked James to help him go to the central continent, so that he could enroll in one of their academies. James agreed to his request and gave him the funds he needed. The king also gave orders for Fort Windermere to be rebuilt, and even drafted a plan to make a fortress that would face the Forbidden Land directly. He knew that if another beast tide occurred, the newly built towns and villages would once again be wiped out from the face of the map. The nobles who had laid claims to the western region supported this plan and even donated a few thousand gold from their own treasury to hasten the building of the fortress. On a hill overlooking Lant, a 14-year-old boy sat on top of an Angarayan goat. He was cradling a 3-year-old girl in his arms, while waiting for the sun to rise. The little girl in his embrace was sleeping peacefully without a care in the world. She was the treasure of the Ainsworth family, Eve von Ainsworth. "Me." Ella bleated softly. "Eve, time to wake up," William said as he lightly poked his little cousin's cheeks. "The sun is about to rise." The little girl's eyelids fluttered. A pair of innocent blue eyes, that were more beautiful than sapphires, drowsily looked up at William. "Good morning, Eve." William smiled at the cute little girl. Eve gazed at him for a few seconds before she closed her eyes to go back to sleep. Her lips moved in a pout for having been disturbed in her slumber. William could only helplessly shake his head as he gazed at the sunrise. He couldn't possibly force her adorable cousin to enjoy the sunrise with him. While taking in the morning light, he heard footsteps coming from behind him. Judging from the weight of every step, William judged that it was none other than his grandpa, James. "Our little darling is still sleeping?" James asked as he stood beside Ella and William. "Yes," William replied. "She woke up a minute ago, but decided to go back to sleep." "Then let her sleep," James said fondly. "Girls need their beauty sleep." "Indeed," William agreed. "The two of you spoil Eve too much." Anna made her way towards her father-in-law and nephew with a smile on her face. "I'm afraid that no one would dare to court Eve when she comes of age with the two of you guarding the front door." "HMP, if anyone dares to court my darling granddaughter, I'll break their legs," James snorted. "Only their legs? It would be best if we break their arms as well," William proposed. "My cute cousin is too precious. What if those bastards try to touch her with their filthy hands?" "Indeed, we should break their arms as well." "Right. No." Anna glared at the overprotective duo. "The two of you better not get in the way of her love life." "Okay, fine." The two men glanced at each other. Clearly, they only agreed on the surface, and would definitely cripple anyone who dared to lay their hands on Eve when she grew up. The silence of the early morning was broken by the cry of a white crane. William raised his head and saw the familiar spirit beast that had first visited Lant when he was 10 years old. A minute later, the 2-meter-tall crane landed beside Ella and looked at William with a gentle gaze. "Thank you for your hard work, big sister Skyla," William greeted with a smile. "How is mother? Is she doing well?" The white crane nodded her head. "Your Fvorit stories on /o/v/lbn.cm." William returned the sleeping Eve to Anna and dismounted Ella's back. He then caressed the head of the white crane before retrieving the parcel tied to her leg. James and Anna shared a knowing glance and returned to the residence together. They wanted to give William some privacy to read his mother's letter. Big sister, there are a few things that I need to do today, so I can only write the reply letter around noon, William said in an apologetic tone. The white crane nuzzled the side of William's face before giving him the "I understand" look. It then opened its wings to fly towards the river where it would catch some fish and rest, while waiting for William to write his letter. William opened the letter in his hands, while Ella rested her head on his shoulder. It was as if she wanted to read the letter that was sent by her baby's mother. Just like always, William read the letter out loud so that Ella could also hear its contents. To my beloved William. Spring has arrived in Wbnovel and the silver moon flowers have started to bloom. I wish that you could see them, but that will have to wait until you are old enough to travel to the Silver Moon continent. Your grandfather and grandmother are doing well and they loved the gifts that you sent them last time. They were still enamored by the recording that you sent as well. They even make sure to play it whenever we have guests in our house. My 2 disciples also loved your singing and were quite curious about who composed the songs that you sang. I know that it might be a hassle, but can you send more recorded songs in your next letters? I promise to treat them better than our own family heirlooms. Since they all know that I am currently writing a letter, they are expecting you to send another batch of gifts when Skyla returns to my side. I know it is a bit troublesome, but do your best, okay? William chuckled as he read the part about his grandparents. He had also exchanged letters with them in the past and he found out that they were more eccentric than his grandfather James. Due to Ella's nudging, he once again focused his attention on reading the letter in his hands. If I remember correctly, by the time this letter arrives in Lond, you will be preparing for your journey towards the capital of the Hellan Kingdom to enroll at the Royal Academy. I am not familiar with the quality of education in the human kingdoms, but I pray that you learn a lot during your stay at the academy. Remember, go there to study and not to fool around with girls. You are still too young for that, so you should focus on your studies. Don't be like your father who attracted all sorts of ladies left and right. Skyla is more familiar with the Hellan Kingdom than me, so I'm sure that she will be able to deliver my letters to you at regular intervals. My beloved, I miss you, and I look forward to the day that I will be able to hold you into my arms. Until then, keep yourself safe and make sure to stay away from harm. Also, pass my love to Ella. I am forever grateful for the love that she has given you all these years. Please, bring her with you when you visit me in Wbnovel. I look forward to thanking her personally. May the blessing of the moon goddesses shine on you every night. Forever loving you, r18 Ainsworth. William kissed the letter after reading it. His eyes were moist as he carefully folded the letter before placing it inside the ring of conquest. Mama, after a few years, we will go to the Silver Moon continent to visit Mother, William said softly. Me. Ella nodded her head. She was also looking forward to her meeting with William's birth mother. If Ella could talk to Arwen in private, she would thank her for bringing William into her life. Without her baby, she would have lived her life as an ordinary Angarian goat and would never have gotten the chance to experience the things that she had experienced during the time that she had stayed by William's side. Chapter 117, March towards the capital. William. Master. Celine caressed the side of William's face. It had been 4 years, and the effect of the slave collar had finally lost its hold over the redhead boy. Do you hate me? Celine asked. She stared at the handsome boy in front of her and waited for his answer. I would be lying if I said no, Master, William replied honestly. Although I feel some resentment towards you, I will not forget that you treated me well over the past few years. I am very grateful to have become your disciple. Celine smiled and patted the boy's head. I will remove the collar now. You must be sick and tired of wearing it this entire time. The beautiful elf was about to remove the collar from William's neck, when the boy held her hands and firmly shook his head. Leave it as it is, Master. William gave Celine a mischievous smile. Didn't you tell me that this is your gift to me? Since it is a gift, you shouldn't take it back. Oh, you like being my slave that much? Celine raised an eyebrow. It is the first gift I received from you, Master. Naturally, it is very precious to me, William answered. HMP, you've become a sweet talker after growing up. Thank you for the praise. Please, praise me more, Master. Celine flicked William's forehead, but it didn't have much force in it. The boy only smiled at his master's attempt to act cute. Have you prepared everything for your journey? Celine inquired. The journey to the capital will take at least 10 days from Lont. Make sure to pack extra food and water. Although you can hunt and find water along the way, it will be best to have food and water in stock in case of emergency. I already have, Master, William answered. Aunt Helen gave me enough food and water to last me half a month. Good. Celine nodded her head. The Royal Academy is a good place to learn. Just make sure to stay out of trouble, do you understand? Don't worry, Master. Even if I don't go looking for trouble, trouble will definitely look for me. That is what I am afraid of. Celine sighed helplessly. To be honest, she was very satisfied to have William as her disciple. Although he had lost his magic power, he never stopped doing his best to strengthen himself. Over the past few years, she made sure that he developed a very strong resistance against curses and poison to the best of her ability. After all, Celine would become a big joke if her acquaintances were to find out that her disciple was easily affected by curses, which was the specialty of dark magicians. I hate goodbyes, so I won't follow you to the gate of Lont. Celine gave William a hug. Come back after you've come of age. There is something that I need to teach you. Is it a new spell? William asked in curiosity. Yes. A powerful spell that will allow you to surpass your limits, Celine replied with a smirk. So, make sure to return after you feel that the Royal Academy can no longer teach you anything. For some reason, I'm looking forward to learning this spell that you are going to teach me, Master. Look forward to it. William waved goodbye to his master as he mounted Ella's back. The enrollment for the Royal Academy would be starting soon. This was why he needed to go to the capital before the registration ended. Celine and James both knew that they couldn't keep William in a small town like Lant forever. If they did, they would only hinder his growth, and that was not a good thing. Although William was only 14 years old, Celine and James both agreed that it was time for the boy to see the world. Since that was the case, going to the Royal Academy of the Hellan Kingdom would be the best place to teach him another side of how the world worked outside the borders of Lant. Mistress, did you already know? Oliver, the parrot monkey, inquired. It's still too early to tell, Oliver, Celine replied as she watched her only disciple disappear in the distance. Perhaps, when he returns in a few years, we will finally know the answer. Understood, my lady. Oliver nodded. He looked forward to the day when William returned to Lant. I hope that he is the one that is mentioned in the prophecy. Oliver had watched William grow up and he could vouch for the boy's character. However, just like his mistress, Celine, said, it was still too early to tell whether the red-headed boy was the one that would fulfill the elven prophecy. Helen tidied William's clothes and wrapped a traveling cloak over his shoulders. When she thought that everything was in order, she gave William a kiss on the cheeks before taking a step back. James, Mordred, and Anna said their goodbyes, which almost made William tear up. Theo, and the rest of William's friends in Lant also gave him a hug and wished him a safe journey towards the capital. Although Eve was only 3 years old, she was a very smart girl. She felt that her big brother Will was leaving her, so she grabbed onto William's clothes and cried. Why is our little princess crying? William asked as he carried the little girl in his arms. Will, Eve latched onto him like a leech as she covered William's traveling clothes with her tears and snot. A/N, yes, is the substitute word I used for Eve's crying. William kissed her cheeks as his hand softly rubbed the back of her head. If he still had his powers, he might have used a sleeping spell to put his cousin to sleep. Will, leave. Yes, don't. Aunt Anna, William said with a pleading expression. Anna stepped forward and coaxed Eve to let go of William. Don't worry, your big brother will return soon. He's just going away for a while to study. Eve grabbed hold of William's clothes, but Anna pried her fingers off him. The little girl bawled her eyes out as she tried to reach for her big brother Will. Seeing Eve's sad expression, William's heart ached so much that he decided to use one of his secret weapons in order to coax the crying girl. William activated Lily's divinity and a lollipop appeared in his hand. He took the wrapper off the candy and presented it to Eve. Here you go. It's your favorite candy, William said like a kind uncle who liked to give candies to little children. Eve's eyes locked onto the lollipop and reached for it. William handed it to her and her crying immediately stopped. Good girl, William patted her head. When I come back, I'll bring you a lot of candies from the capital. Be a good girl until I return, okay? Eve reluctantly nodded her head as she started to lick the lollipop. Lily's divinity was the ultimate weapon against little girls. No, it was an ultimate weapon for girls of all ages. As long as their height doesn't surpass 125 centimeters, 4.11 feet, they would be unable to resist the lollipop's charms. William mounted Ella's back and urged her to move forward. He was afraid that his tears would start to fall if he stayed any longer. Ella understood William's feelings, so she started to run as fast as she could, leaving the town of Lant behind. Only when they were a mile away from Lant did she stop. William turned his head to look back at the small town in the distance. It was the place where he grew up. A place filled with happiness, warmth, and love. I'm only a mile away and I'm already starting to feel homesick. William sighed. He then hardened his heart and looked forward. Mama, let's go. Let's march towards the capital of the Hellan Kingdom. Me. A/N, don't feed 3-year-old children lollipops in real life. They might choke on it. Chapter 118, I wish not for dominion, but I can't let the innocent suffer. Screams reverberated in the air as a merchant caravan was being attacked by bandits. No, please don't hurt my daughter, a woman grabbed the bandit's leg while pleading. The bandit was holding a little girl in his arms, as he sneered at the girl's mother. Clearly, he was unwilling to let her go. Scram? I don't like used goods. The bandit roared as he kicked the woman away. No, Mama, the little girl wailed as he saw her mother's body crash on the ground. Men, take the treasure and all the good-looking girls. As for the rest, kill them all. The bandit leader ordered as he chopped off the head of one of the caravan's guards. Yes, the bandits simultaneously replied as they looked at the carriages with greed. The woman painfully propped her body on the ground, but the injury she received made her unable to stand. Lucy, the woman cried out her daughter's name as tears streamed down the side of her face. Mama. Lucy called out to her mother. Sorry, little girl, but you're not going anywhere. Let me go, I want my mama. Why? The little one struggled, but it was all for naught. The bandit was way stronger than her and the only thing she could do was cry and call out to her mother. The merchant group had descended into chaos as the bandits looted and killed to their heart's content. The guards were hard-pressed to fight them off because the bandits had the number advantage. Over 100 bandits had appeared out of nowhere and ambushed them. the leader of the merchant group, Benjamin, led his men and fought off against the bandits with everything he had. However, their enemies were simply more powerful and more experienced in battle than them. When hope seemed lost, and the end was at hand, the whistling sound of an arrow pierced the air. It landed in the forehead of the man who was holding a little girl in his arms, who hadn't stopped struggling to run to her mother's side. Everything happened so fast that the bandit fell to the ground, not knowing how he died. I wish not for dominion, but I cannot let the innocent suffer. The voice of a young boy spread over the chaotic battlefield. The bandit leader glared at the direction of the voice and saw what seemed to be a boy, wearing a hooded robe, seated on top of an Angarian goat holding a bow and arrow. Gate open, William muttered as he knocked another arrow on his bow and took aim. Behind his back, a portal appeared and a herd of Angarian war ibexes charged towards the bandits with fury. William's arrow flew straight and true as it pierced through the neck of a bandit that was carrying a little boy on his shoulder. Mama, use war cry, William ordered. Me. Ella's war cry resounded in the battlefield, which strengthened the capabilities of William's herd by 30%. Why are these goats so strong? Arg. A bandit cried in alarm as a glistening blue horn pierced his chest. This can't be. This is not possible. The bandit leader backed away when the war ibexes made their appearance. How have these war beasts from the northern regions appeared here? Benjamin, the leader of the merchant group, felt that the tide of battle had shifted in their favor. He immediately ordered his men to support the Angarian war ibexes that had appeared and fought against the bandits with renewed vigor. Benjamin had never seen these beasts before, but the bandit leader's words were laced with shock and disbelief. As a merchant, he was well aware of the tribes in the north, but they had never gone there to trade. Even so, it was not something that he needed to worry about right now. What mattered most was that the newcomer was on their side. Men, kill them all. Benjamin roared as he led his men to battle. William kept on shooting his arrows at the fleeing bandits. The arrows he was using were not ordinary arrows. They were steel arrows forged by the greatest blacksmith of Lant, Barbados. Aside from their piercing power, it also had a paralyzing venom that was taken from the millennial beast, Amphispina. Anyone who got pierced by William's arrow would become paralyzed and unable to move for a few hours. That was how strong the millennial beast's venom was. Return, William ordered, and the arrows that had pierced the bandits flew into the air and returned to the quiver on his back. Some of them were still stained by blood, but William didn't care. He didn't have that many arrows in his possession and each of them was precious. Who are you? The bandit leader roared as he charged at William with his war axe. Just a shepherd, William answered as he deposited his bow and arrows inside his ring of conquest. Come forth. Stormacaller. A purple flash of light burst forth from the ring. William grabbed the 2-meter-long spear in a firm grip as tendrils of lightning traveled along its blade. Ella then took that as a hint and charged towards the bandit leader. William was like a cavalier riding a warhorse to battle. His spear was poised to strike as the bandit leader closed the distance. Lightning God War Art, 13th form. William roared. Go for the kill, Gibalg. William threw Stormacaller and the body of the spear crackled with lightning bolts. The bandit leader knew that he couldn't face the attack head-on, so he jumped to the side to dodge. He succeeded and the spear passed by his side by mere centimeters. The bandit leader then immediately propped himself up on the ground and prepared to clash with William. At the same time, a string of words drifted through his ears. Omi Wamau. The bandit leader didn't understand these words because it was said in a language that he was not familiar with. It was at that moment when his face grew lax and his legs collapsed under him. As the bandit leader fell, his body skidded across the ground, due to the momentum, and only stopped in front of Ella's hooves. Like the bandit that William had shot with his arrow, the bandit leader had died not knowing how he died. William didn't even give the corpse under Ella's hooves a second glance as he waved his hand to control Stormacaller. The family heirloom of the Ainsworth family snaked across the battlefield as it reaped the bandits' lives like the god of death. When the last bandit fell dead on the ground, Benjamin and his men cheered and raised the weapons in their hands to proclaim their victory. Everyone in the merchant group breathed a sigh of relief because they had survived from being wiped out by the bandits. Benjamin was about to thank their benefactor, when he noticed that the young boy wearing a hood had disappeared. Even the Angarian war ibexes who had trampled and impaled the bandits were nowhere to be seen. Your Vorit stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. An eerie silence fell upon them as Benjamin and his guards glanced at each other with dumbfounded expressions. Did we just get rescued by a ghost? One of the guards asked in a stuttering voice. That can't be possible, right? Another guard offered his opinion. This was the same opinion of everyone in the merchant group, but the fact remained that they couldn't find their benefactor. Just like a ghost, he had appeared and disappeared like a passing breeze. He was real, the little girl who was supporting her mother from the ground shouted. He's not a ghost. He saved me and mother from those bad bandits. Everyone looked at the girl and nodded their heads. They had seen the young boy with their own 2 eyes, so it was impossible for them to say that he wasn't real. Yes, he was real. As real as you and me, Benjamin replied. We will properly thank him if we cross paths with him again in the future. This was the only thing that Benjamin could say to pacify his people. Even so, deep in his heart, he wished that he would once again meet the mysterious boy who had saved all of their lives without asking for any reward. After this merchant group arrived at their destination, the story of a young shepherd leading a herd of Angarian war ibexes spread across the land. By the time this happened, William had already arrived at the capital of the Hellan Kingdom and had successfully enrolled at the Royal Academy. End of Volume 1, The Shepherd of Lant. Chapter 119, Gladiolus, the capital city of the Hellan Kingdom. Mama, I finally see it. Me. William and Ella were currently on the mountainside admiring the capital city of the Hellan Kingdom, Gladiolus. The high city walls made William remember the cities in the fantasy movies that he had watched back on Earth. Gladiolus looked like an impenetrable fortress that could easily endure a siege from a beast tide. The sword and shield emblem of the royal family were emblazoned on the flags on the city ramparts fluttered in the breeze. It was as if they were welcoming William's arrival and urging him to enter the city gates as soon as possible. Let's go, Mama. William patted his mama's neck. Let's go visit Est first before we enroll at the Royal Academy. Me. Est had sent him a letter 4 months ago, asking if he was going to enter the Royal Academy this year. After getting William's positive reply, Est immediately made preparations to welcome him at the capital. The young boy gave William the address of their manor and told him to drop by as soon as he arrived in the city. There were still a few days before the start of the enrollment, so William was not in a hurry to visit the academy. He had exchanged plenty of letters with Est, Ian, and Isaac over the past 4 years, and their relationship had deepened since then. When William and Ella finally reached the gate, they noticed that they needed to fall in line to participate in an inspection. According to procedure, William should have also lined up along with the others, but Est explicitly told him to go to the special entrance that was allocated for noble families. Est had given him a special insignia that would allow him to pass through the special gate without getting inspected. William led Ella to the gate located near the main entrance of the city. The guards manning the entrance looked at William with interest. When the boy was just a few meters from entering the gate, a chubby guardsman blocked his way. Boy, is this your first time visiting the capital? A chubby guardsman asked with a smile. He had already dealt with countless people trying to enter the gates meant for nobles in order to find a faster way to enter the city. Yes, Mr. Guard. William nodded his head. This is my first time visiting the capital. It looks so majestic from afar and I'm looking forward to seeing what is inside the city. The chubby guard appraised the young boy who was seated on top of an Angarian goat. The red-headed boy was wearing decent clothes, which didn't make him look like a peasant. Even the traveling cloak he was wearing didn't look too shabby. Because of this, the chubby guard decided to ask questions first before telling William to line up at the main entrance to enter the city. This gate is only meant for the nobles of the kingdom, the chubby man said in a clear and crisp manner. Do you have any form of identification? William smiled and raised the insignia that was given to him by Est. When the chubby guard and the rest of his comrades saw the insignia, all of them stood straight and looked at William in a different light. His chapter is updated by NV.EL, buying.co/m. Can I now pass? William asked. Why yes, the chubby guard stuttered as he stepped aside to allow William to go through. Thank you, Mr. Guard. No need to thank me. I'm just doing my duty, sir. William nodded. He was still doubting whether or not the insignia that Est had given him had actually worked. Fortunately, it was the real deal and he was able to enter the gate without any problems. Wow. William stared wide-eyed at the medieval city in front of him. The cobblestone streets and the buildings made William's heart beat wildly inside his chest. For some reason, he could hear the background music of a big battle that was about to take place inside his head. Several people noticed William's starry-eyed gaze and immediately labeled him as a country bumpkin. There were also others who looked at him with amused expressions. They found it funny that a little boy was riding on top of a goat. Although it was not unheard of, it was still their first time in seeing such a scene in the city of Gladiolus. Me. Sorry, Mama. I got carried away. Me. Ella broke William out of his daze because she could sense that the people were looking at her baby with amusement and ridicule. If William hadn't told her to behave before entering the city, she might have already charged at those people and kicked their faces. After William regained his composure, he decided to ask around in order to find Est's manor in the city. Surprisingly, none of the people he had asked knew the location of Lilac Lane. Since that was the case, William decided to ask a patrolling guard he saw in the distance. At first the patrol guard snubbed him, but William came prepared. He took out the insignia from his storage ring and showed it to the guard captain. Just like what had happened at the gates of the city, the patrol guards suddenly had a 180-degree change in the way they treated William. Lilac Lane, the guard captain whom William asked pondered. The name sounds familiar, but I can't remember where it is. Captain, isn't that lane located in the second level of the city? The guard captain's companion commented. I've been tasked to patrol that area a few times in the past, so I'm very sure that Lilac Lane is found on the second level of Gladiolus. Then, can you please tell me how to get to the second level? William pleaded. I am visiting a friend and his residence is located on Lilac Lane. It can't be helped. The guard captain nodded. Since you are familiar with the place, take this boy to the checkpoint of the second level. Make sure to return after accomplishing your duty. Yes, Captain. The patrol guard smirked at William. Let's go, boy. It's not every day I escort a shepherd in Gladiolus. Thank you, everyone. William bowed. It's nothing. We're just doing our duties, the guard captain replied with a smile. If you encounter any other difficulties, feel free to find me. My name is Aaron. Thank you, Sir Aaron. William nodded his head and bid them goodbye. When William was finally out of earshot, Aaron breathed a sigh of relief. He was surprised that a little kid was carrying the insignia of the Knight Order of Gladiolus. The Knight Order had the highest authority in the city. Only people who had outstanding skills and talent could enter its ranks. Not even nobles could use their money and influence to send their family members to become a part of the Knight Order. Of course, there are also exceptions. Those who performed meritorious service for the kingdom could also join their ranks, with the king's permission. Each knight that belonged to the order was treated like a celebrity in Gladiolus. It was the position that every citizen in the Hellan kingdom strived to reach. Just how did that boy gain that insignia? Aaron thought. Did he steal it? Aaron immediately rejected this idea because it was impossible to do so. After all, the members of the Knight Order were insanely strong. Each of them were capable of dealing with S-level threats on their own. That only left one other possibility. The young boy had to have done something well, since no one in the Knight Order would be foolish enough to give their insignia to just anyone. Chapter 120, Reunion after 4 years. Your favorite stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. This is the place that you are looking for, the patrol guard said as he looked at the address that William had given him. Come with me. The patrol guard walked towards the gates, while William and Ella followed behind him. Before the guard and William could even introduce themselves, the gates opened and a familiar old man walked out with a smile. It has been a while, William, Herman greeted the boy in an easygoing tone. Uncle Herman, it's good to see you again, William replied with a smile. Well, it seems that the two of you are already acquainted, the patrol guard commented. I will now return to my duties. See you around, William. Thank you, Sir Braun. William waved goodbye to the kind man who helped him along the way. When the patrol guard was no longer in sight, Herman led William inside the manor. The smile on William's face stiffened when a pretty boy stood in front of the main entrance with his arms crossed over his chest. You still look as dumb as you were when you were 10 years old. Ian snorted. It has already been 4 years since then and you are still on your period. William asked. You should really see a physician. Having a period for so long might mean that you are suffering from a serious illness. Perhaps it has something to do with your brain. You're still as eloquent as ever. And you're still as annoying as ever. Both boys snorted at the same time. Clearly, although both of them had grown closer, they were still unable to stop their urge to mock each other whenever they met. Why can't the two of you get along? Est sighed as he appeared behind Ian. William, welcome to Gladiolus. I will be your host until you have successfully enrolled at the Royal Academy. I am looking forward to your hospitality. William walked forward and stretched out his hand for a handshake. Est held his hand in a firm grip and shook it twice before letting go. Let's go in. I know that you are tired from your journey, Est said as he made a welcoming gesture. We've also prepared the best hay for Ella. Me. You're welcome, Ella. Est would always do his best to communicate with Ella even though he couldn't understand her language like William. This was one of the reasons why William thought that Est was an interesting person. Besides, Ella was a good judge of character. She had already told William long ago that Est was a good person. Naturally, William trusted his mama's judgment so he was quite happy to have Est as his friend. Est led them to the living room where a beautiful lady, with long blonde hair and green eyes, was waiting for them. She was seated on a chair and was looking at William with kind eyes. William, I would like to introduce you to my mother, Elizabeth Wells Newmont. Mother, this is my good friend William, William von Ainsworth. It's a pleasure to meet you, my lady. William bowed his head respectfully. The pleasure is all mine, William, Elizabeth said with a smile. I've heard a lot of things about you from ESTA. Feel free to call me mother from now on. Mother. Est pouted as he clung to Elizabeth's dress. William found Est's reaction really cute, but he kept a neutral expression on his face. He didn't want to leave a bad first impression on Est's mother. What a fine young man you are, Elizabeth praised. You would be the perfect husband for my daughter. If I ever have a daughter. Elizabeth gave Est a sidelong glance before focusing her attention to William. The expression on Est's face was priceless and Elizabeth was finding it hard to hold back the laughter that was bubbling up inside her chest. I would definitely marry your daughter, if you have one, my lady, William replied with a shameless grin. Well, you'd better remember your words, little Will, Elizabeth chuckled. Who knows what the future will bring? Of course. William nodded. Good-looking men must know how to keep their promises. I'm liking you more and more. Elizabeth was quite satisfied with William's attitude. He wasn't like those noble heirs who were arrogant and stuck up. Est's mother admired William's boldness and his sense of humor. Well, I can't force this issue, Elizabeth thought. It would be best to let nature take its course. William and Ella were treated as VIPs in the Newmont residence. Even Ian did his best not to taunt William in front of Elizabeth. The hours passed by as Elizabeth listened to William's tales about Lant and life in the countryside. Elizabeth had been born a noble and lived by the side of her young lady after she came of age. After they were sent to the Hellan kingdom, a few things happened and she was forced to leave her best friend's side. Even so, the two of them still held deep feelings for each other and their sisterhood had remained strong over the years. William's tale was like a refreshing breeze that reminded her of her younger years. One of these days, I'll go and visit Lant, Elizabeth said after hearing William's tale. Perhaps the fresh air of the countryside will revitalize my monotonous lifestyle. The life in Lant is crude, but it has a rustic charm that you wouldn't find in the city. William was like a salesman that was about to close a deal. It's the perfect place to retire and live your days in peace. Sounds like heaven. It is a piece of heaven that is nestled at the western edge of the kingdom. I'm sure that you will love it, Lady Elizabeth. I wish for that as well, little Will. My grandpa might be stingy to pests, but he treats guests like old friends. Perhaps, the two of you will get along, my lady. Oh my, I'm really looking forward to meeting your grandpa. Elizabeth chuckled. It would be best if I lay the foundations for a good relationship between our families. William didn't know what Elizabeth was thinking because he was very happy at the moment. He could tell that the beautiful woman before him was really interested in visiting his hometown. After an early dinner, William and Ella retired to the room that was specially prepared for them. It was very spacious and had a large bed. The moment William laid his head on the pillow, he immediately fell asleep. He had been camping for the past few days and sleeping outside was not as comfortable as sleeping on a bed that seemed to be made from a marshmallow. Ella laid by his side because the bed was more than big enough to accommodate the two of them. She, too, was tired from their travels. The sound of light snores echoed along the walls of the room as the two guests slept with a dreamless sleep. William is exactly how you described him to be, Elizabeth said as she patted her son's head. A very interesting, yet mysterious, boy. It's a pity that his magic power has been sealed. I'm worried about the treatment that he will receive from the academy. Est sighed. Most likely, he will be sent to the martial classes since he's unable to use magic. You don't need to worry about him, Elizabeth replied. Someone who has stepped forward to hold the falling sky for you will not be affected by the petty system in the Royal Academy. In fact, I am looking forward to the mischief that he will cause. Elizabeth chuckled despite herself. I already feel sorry for the Dean of the Royal Academy. He is going to get one troublesome freshman this year. Est imagined William doing something mischievous and couldn't help but laugh as well. He also felt that William was not someone who would take things lying down. He had already seen how he handled the situation with the disciples of the Misty sect back in Lant. Besides, I trust him, Est thought as a blush appeared on his face. He will definitely create waves the moment he enters the Royal Academy. I am also looking forward to seeing how much he has improved over the 4 years that we haven't seen each other.